Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this November 15th regular City Commission meeting. We will go ahead and call to order and have our approval of the agenda. I don't have any changes. I have a motion. I have a motion from Commissioner Glanzer, a second from Commissioner Hersom. Are there any questions or comments on the agenda? Does the public have any questions or comments on the agenda? Is my mic not? Are you listening to me now? Can you hear me all right out there? Now good? Okay. Being no comments or questions, all those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I'd like to welcome Pastor Andy Cook from Bronson Road Baptist Church. If you would come down and give us our invocation here, sir, and if you would please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance afterwards. Thank you for being here tonight, sir.
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we are so in awe of you and your love for us. We thank you for our city that you have placed here, and we ask, God, that you would be glorified in everything that we do. We pray your special hand of blessing upon our commissioners and mayor and whole staff, and ask, God, that you would lead them according to your plan and your purpose. Thank you for the salvation we have in our Lord Jesus Christ, and through his body and blood we pray. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. We hope to get a chance to see you on Sunday, but we understand if you can't make it there. All right. Well, we will move right into our presentations. Mike, I believe we have an employee spotlight and presentation to begin with.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Dallas Lee, who is not in the room, is going to lead us in that presentation.
Dallas, are you within the sound of my voice?
He's in the back. Maybe we could skip
Maybe we
down
could go to Newberry High School Career Day
Yeah.
and trade first?
Yes, sir, please.
Is that all right with the commission? Okay. Miss Amy, are you going to lead us through that one? Oh, hang on one second. Dallas, are you ready to lead us through the employee spotlight? We'll stay on track then.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners. Tonight's employee spotlight is Miss Donna Pons. Donna was born and raised in Newberry, I believe. Yeah, okay. She graduated Newberry High School, as all good Newberryans do. And she began working for the city in 2012, approximately a week after her mother, Mickey, retired as city clerk from the city of Newberry. So she's been with the city for a total of 6 years. In 2014, Donna was the Employee of the Year for the City of Newberry. She currently holds the position of Staff Accountant 2, which makes her a very popular person in the City of Newberry because she pays all of our bills. So all of our vendors,
We do appreciate
Scott especially
that.
loves her.
Yeah.
In her position, she processes over 5,000 invoices a year, cuts over 3,000 checks, and issues about 1,000 purchase orders. So she's been in that position with us for about 4 years. She has a son, Dylan, and her mom, Mickey, as well as a rambunctious dog. In her spare time, she enjoys going to the beach, and she likes, on the weekends, going antiquing and estate sale shopping. So that's Donna. And as you all know, the city of Newberry takes great pride in the high level of professionalism and skill of our staff. And we always support any member of our team who is taking steps to better themselves through education and training. Donna, over the last year, has been working on completing her Certified Accounts Payable Manager certification. This is a significant achievement that speaks to her skills, dedication, expertise in our industry. And it was a rigorous process that tested her on a plethora of different areas related to AP. In fact, the study guide alone was 200 pages, just for the highlights. So she was successful in obtaining her certification in Accounts Payable Management, which is the highest level of accounts payable certification offered by the Institute of Finance and Management. So it's with great pride and joy that I present Donna with this certificate, which acknowledges her as an accredited accounts payable manager and signifies her level of expertise and knowledge in the field of AP. All kinds of photo ops.
Which way?
Congratulations. Ms. Donna, we do appreciate it when employees continue that education and get more certifications, more skills. You know, we love it when we can work you even harder, right? Well, congratulations and well done. All right, I believe we have some more congratulations in order with our next presentation, which is the Newberry High School Career and Trade Day, which I was able to personally attend, but I don't steal any thunder just yet. Go right ahead.
Go right ahead. I'm just here to give the highlights. We held our 4th annual Newberry High School Career and Trade Day. We've kind of expanded the name. We started out as a job fair, then a career fair, so now it is our Trade and Career Day. So we had over 300 students attend this year, which it was held at Newberry High School, so that was pretty cool. Only juniors and seniors. So our seniors, of course, have been there once. They knew the route. They knew what they were doing. Our juniors came in. They got all the bling this year, so we have to kind of spread out the bling next year. We did have representatives from Santa Fe College, Florida Gateway College, and Marion Technical College. We had a couple of presenters that were unable to show up because, of course, all their instructors were in the Panhandle. Happened right after Michael came through. So basically, as this was developed as part of our economic development tenet, showing that providing a way to show that a trained workforce will attract the industry here into Newberry and then keep our workers here at home. So that worked out really, really well. This year we did have representatives from fire services, from law enforcement, and by business, it's like business administration from Santa Fe College. Animal services, we actually had their zoology program, the zoo program from Santa Fe, which is the second year that they have shown up, and they are a highlight. The students really get a lot of information like that. Then we also have our education and our construction technologies. We had several businesses that participated. What we do is we match a local business with the programs so that students have an opportunity to ask real life questions. Not will you hire me, that's not the real life question. But if I get this certification, if I get this degree, if I get this go through this technical program, what can I do with it? And it really gives them, the students have seemed to give us positive feedback from that they really do like that. So this year, I'm not going to read them for you, but these are all of the local businesses that did show up, including our Newberry Fire Department and our planning department. Our principal planner, Wendy Kinzer, came out and was able to give, even more information too. We did have a couple of questions last year, so she was on site this year. Do you have any questions?
Amy, I just want to say I know you took the lead on this project and you really worked to put it together like you do every single year, and it was, I think, the best that we've had so far. I mean, it gets better every year. The kids talked about it the rest of the day. They had a great time. You had a great array of different industries, and it really was that engagement with local folks that they could ask questions about. And they almost all brought things to give out to the kids. We'll make a no whistle rule next year because the whistles were a little loud in the gym there. But it was well done, and for me, this hits on a note because I think we've gone a little crazy in this country with everybody goes to college, and this gives the kids a moment to see that there's a lot of things that you can do in this world, in this life. A lot of careers, a lot of trades, a lot of options, So I appreciate you carrying the load, making sure that this happens, and I'm glad the high school was able to partner with you this year and really make it something special. So thank you so much.
We intend to work with Principal Shepard next year as well.
That's
We're
right.
going to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, does the commission have any questions for Amy about the Career Day? Next time we'll get an elected official table up there. I don't know if that's a career. Yeah, well, I'll do a better job of communicating with you guys about that. So, but we certainly appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm actually going to stay here because I have more pictures to show you.
Oh, we have more pictures.
Yes, so we had several events in the last 2 months. So our next event was the city clerk's My City event. I'm part of it, I'm proud of it. And she partnered with the Newberry Branch Library again this year. We had over 100 children and adults. We had a really good turnout. We had 5 different, with the library, we had 5 different stations set up. So one of which was our famous bucket truck, and we have decided that Bucky is going to be, you know, the hands-on person, because he kept them entranced and off of the
He
bucket
did.
truck. So he did a great job with that. We also had our own fire department out there. They handed out helmets. They talked to the kids about safety. They let a few, before it got real busy and we had a lot, but they let them climb in the truck. We had students actually asking, I mean, these are mostly elementary age students that come to this, and asking really good questions. So it was a chance to show off our city. The library hosted a craft table. They got to color like a fire truck or a dump truck and things like that. Then we had city trivia, which our librarians gave out prizes, and they did ask questions about our city. They wanted to know if the mayor was the mayor of Newberry or the mayor of Florida, and the kids could answer it most of the time. And another section that we had was a meet and greet, and Mayor Marlowe and Commissioner Herson were able to be there that day. And again, they had one-on-one conversations with these young people, letting them know that our representatives are right here willing to talk to them no matter what age they are. So that worked out really well. And of course, it ended with the mayor up in the bucket truck taking
Always
a
up in
picture
that
of all
bucket
of
truck.
us. So, and the kids like that part too, because they can look up there and just wave. They find that really exciting.
I told Commissioner Hersom next year it's going to be his turn. Hell.
I've been up in the bucket truck one
Yeah.
time to take a picture of Main Street. It is awesome.
And the kids, their favorite thing about Newberry is the parks. They love the parks, so they just want parks on every corner. So if you guys can make that happen, I'm sure they would be thrilled.
All right, our next event was our Arbor Day celebration, and we actually had our Arbor Day celebration on November 7th this year, and we planted a 30-gallon tree at the fire department this year. We had a Shumard oak that was donated by Blue Moon. Blue Moon paid for a third of it, then Florida Forestry paid for a third of it, and then the city paid for a third of it. So it was really great. Again, our after-school children are the main attendants. We do have the garden club that regularly attend our Arbor Day celebrations and actually assist with it. So then arborist Dave Concern, I believe he might be retiring pretty soon, Wendy. So we might have to start bringing in somebody else, or we'll have to have him keep working when he's done. Our very own code enforcement officer got right in there, got some shovels, and helped those kids figure out how to pile the dirt. So it's something that everybody gets involved in, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for the children as well. It's a good age for it. Is the after school? They're interested enough. They don't get bored really fast. We had slash pines that were donated by the Florida Forestry Service. Last year they donated 100. This year they donated 125. Every one of them found a home. Last year we kind of had to try to figure out somebody to plant 10 or 15 of them. But this year, every one of them found a home. So hopefully, next year we'll get the what was the other one, Mike, that you were interested in?
Anything those
Can't think of it. It's like yes, the longleaf. Thank you, the longleaf pines. So again, we just wanted to make sure to thank Half Moon Growers and the Newberry Garden Club for providing our students and our community the opportunity to plant a tree and to be able to go back over the years and watch it grow. Then finally, this past week on Tuesday, when we all got back after the holiday, 4 of your employees went to the Newberry Elementary School, and they got to read a book to 1st through 3rd grade. So your city clerk was there, Janine Mirnak from the planning department, and Marcia Lee from the building department, and myself. And they got an opportunity to find out where food actually comes from. The farm, not the store. It's not, we don't have a factory in those back doors where they pull out food. So it was a lot of fun reading to them, and all of the teachers really appreciated that we provided them with educational material that they could continue to use. And that is my presentation.
Well, the staff has been very, very busy putting on events for the kids, for the town, and we certainly do appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. It's an important piece of being a community, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioner, have any questions about any of those activities? Thank you, ma'am. Okay, well, it's time for our public announcements. I just remind folks, these are the non-controversial 2-minute type announcements. That's you. Come on up.
I'm never controversial.
Seems to be some disagreement about that
Yes.
fact.
And just in case anybody doesn't know, we have a Newberry Fall Festival this Saturday from 9 to 4, and certain part of the festival we hope will be open until 7 in a well-lighted area. We have,
We'll get to that part, Ms. Peggy. It's on-
right,
okay.
Alachua County sheriffs will be there to help people cross 26.
Awesome.
Because obviously there'll be a lot of parking across the way. Bloodmobile will be also across the street. We have 107 vendors this year. We actually had to turn away more than 20 this last week because we just didn't have any space for them. So this about doubles the size of one we've had in the past. And we have some special, some of our entertainment is special, like Sarah Trim, who is a local young lady who is quite a nice singer. We have a young man and friend who play fiddle, folkloric type music on the fiddle and guitar. We have dancers, different kinds of ethnic dancers. We have pony rides, of course, and we have this year a camel ride. And I've seen it dressed up, so it looks like it'd be a lot of fun.
Chance to ride a camel in Newberry.
Ride a camel
Yeah.
in Newberry. And I'm sure, and then we have a special feature called Stilt Walkers. This is a young couple from Trenton, and they go all over the country to do their act. And they've designed some special costumes just for this festival. And I'm sure I've forgotten something, but come
But
out
they
and
have
you'll
to
see.
come to the festival and find out what that is.
That's exactly
There
right.
it is. Yeah.
And there'll be a lot of food and a lot of fun and some new people this year, some new vendors.
We are all super, super excited about that, and we're so grateful to Main Street and the work that you guys have done. And I'm sure it's going to be spectacular, and it's going to just be the pinnacle of the last 5 years of rebuilding this and getting it to this level. I think this is bigger than it's ever been. So you guys have quite an achievement to be proud of. Thank you so much. Any other public announcements?
Good evening. Louise Smith, citizen. I just wanted to let y'all know also that Peggy and I attended a Newberry Main Street State Conference down in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. And the day we were leaving, we did do a tour downtown and took pictures of some of the murals that they had done. And we also came back, and before we were leaving, there was a drawing, and I won a $2,500 technical assistant from the state office, Main Street State Office in Florida, that they are going to award us to use for technical assistance. So that was pretty
That
exciting.
is really awesome. $2,500. Good
Yeah,
job.
that was-
Did you
and
go
Peggy
right out
won a
that day and buy a
t-shirt.
lottery ticket?
So it was worth staying the extra day.
The guy who did the murals was giving his T-shirts out.
Yes, that's awesome. Good job. Well done. Any other public announcements? Hearing none, we'll move to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? I have a motion from Commissioner Coleman, a second from Commissioner Farnsworth. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, our first public hearing is on our quasi-judicial public hearing and first reading of ordinance 28-13. I couldn't pull this one up. Mike, do you have an extra copy of this? Oh, that's fine. If you've got an extra, we could use an extra one down
I don't think we have one.
here. Okay, Mike, are you going to lead us through?
Mr. Mayor, I'm expecting Brian
Expecting
Thomas
Brian to lead us through.
to lead us. Is that correct? Am I wrong?
Oh, I'm sorry, wait. This is not the quasi-judicial. This is an actual quasi-judicial for the more, I'm sorry. I'm skipping ahead in my brain. So, okay, this is the petition by Morgan L. Smith, agent for S&T Newberry Holdings LLC for the city of Newberry to vacate a right-of-way located adjacent to Alachua County tax parcel. And this is an actual quasi-judicial, so I will read our current procedures. Okay, so this procedure is to ensure that the applicant provides a complete presentation of their request prior to any testimony being provided by the staff. All public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into the evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. The procedure we're going to follow this evening is that we will first hear from the applicant with no time limit. Second, the applicant will then be subject to cross-examination. Third, the staff will then enter the staff report on the record and answer questions. Fourth, the applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony against the application. Then the floor will be open for public comment, with each presentation being limited to 5 minutes. Members of the public will have an opportunity to question the applicant or staff. Then the applicant will have an opportunity for closing arguments. Finally, the public hearing will be closed, and the commission will enter into deliberations. If anybody is here tonight and you think you may speak on this, please please stand so that our clerk can administer the oath to you at this time. If you have any possibility that you might say something, we'll knock it out right now.
Morgan Smith.
Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Okay. Before the applicant gives his presentation, does any of the commissioners have any ex parte communication they need to disclose? Commissioner Coleman? No, sir. Commissioner Herson? No. Commissioner Farnsworth? No. Commissioner Glanzer? I do not either. Applicant, do you have a presentation? Don't feel the need that you have to have one.
Good evening. The property in question is there's a triangle on the, used to be the south side of 15th there, where the old pipeline was. And there's a right-of-way that is on the west side that was vacated some years ago. It's never been used, and we would just like to regain that to increase the property size for use.
Okay.
That's it.
That's a good summary. Thank you for being concise. All right. I'm sorry, does the commission have any questions for the applicant? I think we'll get in more detail in the staff report. No? Okay. Mr. Coleman?
I need to disclose that S&T Newberry Holdings LLC bought that from a family member, if that has any bearing.
I don't think this can possibly inure to your benefit or gain, so.
No, sir.
Yep. So I don't think you need to recuse yourself or any of that sort of thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, Brian, will you tell us a little, I understand this one got a little complicated digging into the history of it.
Yes, for sure I did. Basically, the right-of-way process, when a parcel is turned into a right-of-way, it's dedicated through some sort of an instrument, usually a plat when a subdivision is platted or something of that nature. You know, the process to turn that back when it's no longer needed and in use is the applicant makes the request. Utility department goes out and does locates, make sure that we don't have any facilities underground that are still active. The utility director approves the vacation because the city no longer needs it. The commission then would approve the right-of-way vacation via ordinance, and so that's where we're at today. The parcel in question, as Mr. Smith noted, it's a triangular shape, kind of an odd-shaped lot. The red area is the 40-foot right-of-way. It runs between the subject parcel and the railroad right-of-way. It's actually listed in the old plat as Tamiami Trail, which is interesting because we're not anywhere near Tamiami Trail, but that's what it's listed as. Looking back to our best of our research, limited research we could do, it hasn't been used, or perhaps was never used by the city. It was just originally platted that way, but Sylvania Terrace was platted back in 1926. And so there's no anticipated use by the city There's the boundary survey. It's a little bit over 1 acre. I think it's about 1.1 acre in total. The applicant would like to reacquire that right-of-way. I mean, basically, in the plat, it was taken from essentially this parcel, and so when it's vacated, it goes back to the original adjacent parcel. And so basically, the applicant would like to take it to be able to expand the potential uses on the property that he's seeking to develop. And so the one caveat is that the utility director does recommend that we maintain a 20-foot public utility easement on the far western boundary. This is it would be 5 feet. There's already a 15-foot setback requirement for any structures on the property, and so this would only constitute an additional 5 feet, just in case in the future there is a need for public utilities to go down that line. And it's a fairly standard approach when properties are vacated, similar to our alleyways. When we vacate alleyways, we still maintain the public utility easement just in case in the future it ever becomes a requirement. And so staff recommendation is approval of the right-of-way vacation by the city. Go ahead and amend that. We would have the applicant amend his legal description to include the 20-foot public utility easement, and approve on first reading the amended ordinance 2018-13.
Commission have any questions for staff? Commissioner Glanzer?
On that east side, just curious, years ago, wasn't there like a Murphy easement or something? Did that get taken off?
Mr. Mayor, we looked into that, and this particular section did not appear to have the Murphy line drawn on it. We didn't find any record of that. Further, we contacted the railroad, and the railroad also said they didn't have any record of this being part of their right-of-way. It apparently was dedicated back when the Sylvania Terrace plat was recorded in 1926, and came from that platting. And so the proper approach would be to vacate it back to the adjacent parcel that was part of Sylvania Terrace.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
Just kind of curious as what this area is zoned for.
The subject parcel, the parcel, or it's highlighted in green there, is commercial intensive. The vacated parcel would automatically revert to commercial intensive, the same as the adjacent property.
Is that easement ever being used for anything?
To the best of our knowledge, it has not. We couldn't find any record of it actually being put into use.
Okay.
That'll do it for you, Commissioner Farnsworth. Any other questions from the commission for staff?
Ronnie, I think it's inherent that a public utility easement is over, under, and across. I don't know if we anticipate ever hanging an electric line, overhead line on it, or do you feel that we should say over, under, and across in the reservation, or do you think we're all right? My recommendation would be add that.
I was going to say, I would normally ask you that question.
Right.
I think the language, I think the language for a public utility easement, it's inherent that it's over and under, but we could certainly specify that.
Unless there's some feeling that we won't need, but I would recommend we add that to the language in the ordinance.
Ms. Mayor? Good? Change your mind?
I think that's appropriate, unless the applicant has strong feelings that they want it undergrounded. The only thing we would put above ground would be electric infrastructure. I can't imagine an instance that we would, but you never say never. I think if the applicant is comfortable with either, we would be over, under, and across. If the applicant says that's really going to mess with our sight line, then I think that if we were to use the easement, we could go underground there.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay. Does the applicant feel the need for any rebuttal? You want to talk to the commission about how you feel about that? You're fine with it? Okay. All right. Then the floor is now open for any public comment. Hearing none. Does the applicant have the need for any closing arguments? Okay. All right, now we'll now hear we'll now close the public hearing, and the commission can enter into deliberations. Anybody have any comments, questions? Are you ready for a motion?
Is the attorney going to read the ordinance?
I'll be happy.
Go ahead and do that now, please, Mr. Attorney.
Mr. Mayor, this is ordinance number 2018-13, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, vacating the 40-foot right-of-way west and directly adjacent to Alachua County tax parcel 02530-004-000 to the property owner of said parcel, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass ordinance number 2018-13 as read by title only, the insertion of the language over, under, and across in the reservation as the permanent utility easement.
I have a motion from Commissioner Glanzer.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Herson. Any questions on the motion on the floor?
Does the, I don't have the ordinance in front of me, does it include the 20-foot easement for the,
That
We're-
does.
there's a recommendation, I don't know whether
Yes,
that's
it's just reserving the 20-foot. We're giving up the 40-foot right-of-way,
right.
and then we're reserving the 20-foot, and I think it's the western, adjacent to the western boundary,
Okay.
so it's
Just
far
wanted to be,
west.
just wanted to be sure.
That's right.
Any other questions from the commission? Any questions from the public on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. Hopefully it'll work out well. All right. We will move to item B, which is legislative public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2018-19 pertaining to the adoption of a policy regarding treatment of industrial wastes within the city of Newberry. This has been a long time coming.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jones,
The-
take us through this,
The
please.
proposed ordinance is adopting a policy for the control of fats, oils, and greases, discharges into the city wastewater system. And recommendation from staff is that you approve this ordinance on first reading. As the mayor alluded to, we came before this body quite a while back and did a presentation on all the problems associated with fats, oil, and grease discharges from food service establishments within the city. And if you recall, is prohibited by Florida Administrative Code and even by city ordinance, but there really wasn't any language that spoke to how we would deal with it if it occurred. So what we're asking you to do tonight is amend our existing ordinances, and which gives us the authority to put forth a policy on how we would address any discharges of fats, oil, and greases into the wastewater system by food service establishments.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Jamie? This came about when we had some real bad issue, and when we pulled out the pipes, it was clear that may could have been prevented. Commissioner Coleman?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, is this, I know we need this, but is it going to end up, I don't know enough about it, is it going to end up costing these restaurants and stuff additional money?
Only if they violate the ordinance.
So not putting in some special equipment and all that, right?
The equipment is required by the building code when they construct.
Right.
What the policy does is ensure that they operate and maintain that equipment where it performs its intended function. And if for some reason it did not, we would work with that business to get the cooperation to ensure that it was maintained properly. And there is an enforcement mechanism to that, but that's the last resort. We would work for compliance through cooperation.
You answered my question.
Mr. Mayor, could I tag on to that?
Sure.
Just as an add-on to Jamie's very well put together answer. In addition to that, it allows us to comply with our wastewater permit, which requires us to have this program in place. Furthermore, if it's operated properly by the business and maintained properly by the businesses that own them, then it doesn't end up being an additional cost to all the residential customers that use the sewer system but don't generate these types of waste. But if not properly maintained, failure to do something like this will surely cost all residential customers additional money.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely for this, and that's, I'm glad you brought it before us. The one question I do have is, I'm not familiar how the whole system works. Is this something that is also in older buildings that we have here in the city of Newberry, or older restaurants?
Your older restaurants do have internal or external grease traps. All restaurants in the city of Newberry at this point in time do have some form of grease trap or grease interceptor.
So it can be an external thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? No? Hearing none? Is anybody ready to make a motion with Mr.
Mayor,
Turner?
I'll go ahead and put this, read this by title only. This is ordinance number 2018-19, an ordinance of the City of Newberry pertaining to the adoption of a policy regarding treatment of industrial waste within the City of Newberry, amending Chapter 98, Section 98-233 of the Code of Ordinances of the City by adding a provision which adopts the Fats, Oils, and Greases Control Plan, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass ordinance number 2018-19 as read by title only.
Move to approve.
I have a motion from Commissioner Farnsworth, a second from Commissioner Coleman. Any further questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Any questions from the public on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, and now we'll move to item C, which is legislative public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2018-20, authorize the City Commission to grant ad valorem tax rebates for economic development projects. And this has been also a long time coming. We've got this referendum. This is the exciting thing on the agenda tonight. Let's hear what it's going to do. All right.
I've been anticipating this for a while.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, the origin of this started back the early part of 2017 with the referendum. Very quick. There's a lot of data, a lot of information. I'll go through it as quickly as possible. Try not to put anybody to sleep while we're doing it. Just a brief overview. Again, the economic development ad valorem tax exemption. The purpose of that is to attract new businesses to Newberry, to give an added incentive to a business that might be evaluating other communities against us, give us a leg up against the competition. For somebody coming in who's going to hire and bring in new jobs, pay higher than average wages, and make a capital investment in the community. As you mentioned, we had to have a referendum of the electors of the City of Newberry before we could do that. The Commission approved an ordinance allowing for the ad valorem exemption referendum question on the 2017 ballot, April 11, 2017, of which the electors actually voted in favor of the referendum at 74%. Basically, again, just a quick review. Newer expanding company agrees to create a minimum number of jobs that are specified actually in this ordinance. Those jobs have to pay higher than average wages, typically set at 115% of your local county area wage, and they agree to make a significant capital investment in the community. Once that's agreed to, we enter into a contractual agreement, specifies all the terms. They exempt a negotiated amount, and each one, I want to emphasize that several times, each exemption is done specifically to that business on a case-by-case basis. Even if two businesses are identical to each other, one comes in year one and one comes in year 2 or 3, you don't have to give the same exemption, or you don't have to give any exemption to the similar business. It's independent. Each one is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. The company then documents those jobs and provides an annual report back to the city that shows that they've complied with the terms of their agreement that got them the exemption, and the exemptions can be negotiated for a period up to 10 years from the granting of the exemption. Who can qualify? You've got to be on the state's targeted industry list. That's manufacturing and other high-impact industries. The city can narrow that list if for some reason they wanted to reduce the number of qualified targeted industries. and retail-oriented businesses don't qualify. So anything in the retail sector, the service sector, those kind of jobs would not qualify. And they have to meet the criteria established in this ordinance. Again, each one is separate by separate ordinance and individual. Just because a business is qualified for the exemption, they are not entitled to that exemption. And so you always have the control, the commission always has the control of who is granted or is not granted an exemption based on the merits of their application. And also other considerations such as the financial outlook of the city at that time. If the city may not be able to afford an exemption, they could say no for that very reason as well.
Commissioner Coleman?
So, when you say retail, like Publix or Super Walmart or any of those?
Sure, that's correct. The retail is specifically prohibited category of industry from the state statutes that authorize the exemption. And so, Ordinance 2018-20, we got past the first step. We passed the referendum by the voters, and so now this ordinance is what then codifies the exemption program itself. And so, it outlines the purpose and intent and the items that are up there, of course, to provide an incentive to bring businesses to the city or expand businesses within the city and keep our existing businesses as they grow, create new jobs, obviously, enhance quality of life. It establishes the tax exemption as law in the city of Newberry. It only applies to taxes levied by the city, and so the laundry list of taxes that you see on your annual tax bill are the only one that's affected by this is ours, is the city of Newberry ad valorem tax. Unfortunately, the county doesn't offer this, which would be a nice added incentive for the county as well as Newberry, but they don't, at least not yet. If a business decides not to proceed, then it's automatically revoked, and like I said, it's granted. You can grant it for up to 10 years. Once the 10-year period, if you get a business in and we grant them an exemption, they get up to 10 years, and that's the commission decides that term. That can go beyond the expiration of the referendum that approved 10 years of the exemption, and so every 10 years we do need to go back. If the commission desires to maintain the ability to grant exemptions, then we have to go back and do another referendum every 10 years, get the voter approval, and then can carry on with the exemptions. Application requirements are what you would expect, of course, the name and type of industry, the description of what specific property is going to be exempted, they're going to get exemption for, proof that they actually qualify by the state statutes as a new or expanding business, and there's definitions that are referenced in the ordinance back to the state statutes. Number of jobs created, average wages, how many are full-time versus part-time, how long it's going to take to create the jobs, and that will have a bearing on how fast or slow you want to grant the exemption or the exemption to kick in. Are they going to place emphasis on hiring residents or a certain percentage of residents? Are they going to create a program specific to trying to provide jobs for the community? Not just because you could have a company come in that's employs several hundred people, and obviously they're not going to employ all from the local community, and there would be no requirement they had to. But if they wanted to get extra, say, points towards their exemption from the commission, they could say, well, we're going to establish a program that we want to guarantee we're going to hire 25% local residents or something like that as an extra added inducement. Of course, environmental impacts, you don't want to bring a company in, incentivize a company that's necessarily going to be a problem for the environment. Whether it's located in the CRA, once our CRA is established here shortly, you could have some impact on that, because if the business locates in the CRA district, then the incremental tax increases that they would be going towards the CRA would then, of course, not go to them because we're exempting them. And so there should be some considerations there. And, of course, a statement confirming that they wouldn't come without the incentive. The review process, the city manager or designee, I can guess who that might be, will review the application for completeness and eligibility, make a recommendation to the commission, who then within 90 days holds a public hearing for the adoption of an ordinance. City sends a copy of the application to the property appraiser for a tax analysis and report back to the city, which will tell us the total amount of revenues currently being generated by values, the value of the revenues that would be lost due to existing, or that are being lost due to existing exemptions, if any, and the value basically of what that exemption would be if it was applied in the current year, so that we have an idea of how much the exemption total would be. And then within 45 days of the review by the commission, they hold the public hearing for an ordinance to grant the exemption. If the commission decides to move forward, the ordinance is then developed outlining the terms of the exemption. And again, just want to emphasize, and this is codified in the ordinance, no precedent is set by granting of an exemption to any one company. It's always on an individual basis, and the commission always has the control over who does or does not get an exemption, regardless of the circumstances. If they fail to meet their agreed upon targets, if they don't create the jobs they said, or they don't make the capital investment in the time that they've said they would, the commission has the option to renegotiate the contract with them, or they could revoke it by ordinance, either way. In fact, just at last word on that, there's also language in the ordinance that if they are found not to be in compliance, but they've already gotten the exemption for a preceding year, the commission can go back and actually get those taxes back for noncompliance as well. And so it protects the city's interests forward and backward. And so staff recommendation would be to approve ordinance 2018-30 on first reading.
Commissioner Glanzer?
I'm encouraged to hear that 74% of their citizens voted for it. I think it shows that they want to put their money where their mouth is when they say that they want jobs and growth and development. So that speaks loudly for me. And, thank you for working up this ordinance.
Other questions? Commissioner Farnsworth?
Okay, I don't quite understand how come it's tied into the state. How come we don't have a standalone ordinance that we put together ourselves?
Mr. Mayor, the ability for municipalities and counties to offer a tax exemption is based on state statute, and so basically we have to comply to be able to grant that tax exemption. We have to comply with the state statutes relative to the granting of the tax exemptions.
So there's no other cities in the state of Florida that has a standalone statute or ordinance that will allow businesses to come in and have a tax exemption?
Mr. Mayor, not that I'm aware of, just because the nature of the state statute that enables us to do this. It may be, I know there are some communities that set funding aside for an economic development fund, like a trust fund, where they can use it as incentive money, but I'm reasonably sure that the ability to grant an actual ad valorem tax exemption comes through the state statutes that enable it. So we're limited to that.
All right, you say this is for, is it a maximum of 10 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is that in the ordinance itself?
Yes.
And is there a minimum time? Is it 1 year or?
That's completely up to I mean, logically, it would have to be at least 1 year, but.
Yeah, logically.
But that, again, those terms, every term in the exemption granted is at the discretion of the commission.
And after that, my concern is I don't want this to become a perpetual thing for a business, because obviously the property tax can have a huge impact on our budget and decreasing the property taxes of the citizens of Newberry. So I'd hate to see something that is renewed every 10 years, whatever the case may be.
I'm sure
The program gets renewed every 10 years, right?
Yes.
But right, based on the voters, because that's go to referendum. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the program would then reapply to the same business. So, I mean, I think the issue is there's an awful lot of factors that go into each business that would come in front of you guys, but you guys have complete control on how long this is going to be good for, what you're going to do with it, how you're going to frame it per application. So it's just the program that has to be renewed every 10 years, and it wouldn't necessarily automatically just renew for each
For each
applicant.
okay.
Yeah, and actually, Mr. Mayor, you're right. Again, by state statute requirements, you're only allowed to grant it for 10 years. You're not even allowed to renew it. Now, if a company that was given an exemption, then 5-10 years expanded, they could qualify for the expansion.
Could come back in front of you guys, but again, it'd still be up to you guys to say, yeah, we think that's good, or no, you already took advantage of this one time, and we think it's a one-time deal. Because there is no, legal precedent that is set by each agreement that you come to with each applicant. There may be a public perception aspect to that, hey, you did it for one person, but there's no legal binding to that.
And given that the commission always has the discretion for all of the different terms, some of the things that you could consider, you could do staged exemptions where, year 1 through 2, 3 is 100%, but then year 4, 5, 6 is 75%, and it diminishes over time. And actually, there's some merit to that simply because it could be problematic for a business to have 100% exemption if it was a large business paying tens of thousands of dollars, and then at the end of year 10, all of a sudden they have a dramatically higher tax bill that they haven't been having to pay for the previous 10 years, so there may be some merit to phasing it down over time. Those kind of considerations, but again, it's all up to the commission.
And if the criteria that's set forth in the beginning isn't met by the company, does it automatically revert back to a paying full taxes, or do it has to come before the commission again to be
If they
debated?
don't comply from the start, if they give notice that they've changed their minds, or they for whatever reason they don't want the exemption because they don't want to meet the criteria the agreement established, it automatically revokes. It's
Okay.
automatically revoked. However, if they're, say, a couple of years into the program and then they slowly stop meeting their criteria, then the commission has the option, again, through ordinance, to go back and either revoke or amend the exemption based on performance.
Commissioner Coleman?
I'm really excited about this. We had one commissioner say that with this that you're picking and choosing, but it's pretty clear the way, and you've done a great job here. Well, hey, if this company's meeting somewhere close here, hey, let's go to Newberry. I heard about this. I think it's a great thing, bringing more industry in here and jobs for our local people. I think this is great, and I've been for this since I've been on the board with it, so I'm glad it's finally here.
Commissioner Herson?
Just a question for clarification. I read in there that the wages, any new wages have to be 115% of the average wage of Alachua County. Is there a reason why we have to go with Alachua County and not the Newberry area specifically?
Again, back to state statutes, that's your local area, and your local area is defined as the county, because that's probably the smallest area they can guarantee they have statistics for on wage data.
Is that it, Commissioner Herson?
Yep.
My only question, Brian, is I just want to make sure I understand how this is actually going to work. So I'm a business. I'm thinking about coming to Newberry. There's all of these factors that I could or couldn't get credit for doing. That applicant is going to work directly with most likely you, and then he's going to say, look, I'm going to be hiring kids right out of Newberry High School. I should get credit for that because 50% of my employees are going to be Newberry kids, right? Is that how it's going to be a negotiation with staff on what the applicant wants you to bring to the commission and say, hey, give me credit for this, and you're going to say, yeah, but you're hiring high school kids, that's not the 115%. So is that how that process is going to work logistically?
In general, that's right. It would be something very much like that. You would have a business that's evaluating multiple communities, say for a relocation or an expansion of their business, and we get approached and they say, well, I'm looking at these other communities, and we offer, well, if in consideration of that, we have this economic development tax exemption option. You have to guarantee a certain number of jobs and capital investment and everything. Then once they get to the point where they say, okay, we want to go with Newbury, you would enter into the negotiation phase, and it would, be the city manager, the city attorney, probably the mayor, in the initial phases, and then probably draft some sort of an agreement, bring it back to the commission for the commission's consideration, and work out the details, possibly even in workshop or something like that. I mean, something like this, especially a large employer, if we were to hit on a large employer, is probably going to take several rounds of negotiating. But then as you narrow it down, you get it to the final stages of the agreement, and then you put that into an ordinance and codify it.
Would the end of this be a quasi-judicial decision? Are there any ex parte considerations that, I'm the applicant and I think I should get credit for something, and you're saying, not so much. They just start lobbying directly?
I don't believe it'd be quasi-judicial because you're not sitting as a judiciary
judge.
body. It's a legislative decision, but I'll defer to our attorney to make that determination.
I tend to agree it would be legislative.
Okay. I think that's it. Anybody else have any questions? Does the public have any questions? I'm sorry, we don't have a motion. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and
Go ahead,
read
yeah,
the ordinance.
I'm sorry. See, I'm just getting all out of whack. I'm so excited here.
This is ordinance 2018-20, an ordinance amending Chapter 86 taxation of the City of Newberry Code of Ordinances, creating and adding Article 4, Economic Development ad valorem tax exemptions, adding sections 86-101 through 86-112, providing enactment and authority, providing purpose and intent, providing definitions, authorizing economic development ad valorem tax exemptions, establishing application procedures, establishing an application fee, providing for appeals, providing for repealer, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass ordinance 2018-20 upon its reading by title only.
Okay, now do I have that motion?
Motion to approve ordinance 2018-20.
Okay, motion from Commissioner Herson, second from Commissioner Glanzer. Now any questions from the dais on the motion on the floor? Any questions from the public on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Great job, residents who voted for it. Great job, staff, putting this together. Great job, commission. Let's go out and land one of those big applicants. All right, let's move on to our agenda items. First is a request by our Newberry Main Street organization for a special temporary use permit to sell alcoholic beverages, beer and wine on private property during the fall festival. Do we have anyone from Main Street? Staff is going to do it? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give you the overview of the application, the beer garden area is going to be contained in the parking lot area there that's just north of the Newberry Library. The festival area runs up and down Larry Keene Drive there, but the beer garden itself will be in that area. They have, Newberry Main Street has applied one time in the past, I think a couple of years ago, right after we passed the ordinance, the city passed the ordinance that allows for alcoholic consumption on public and private property for events. And there were no incidents reported or any kind of issue with that. And so the application is simple. It's basically a one-day permit to allow them to sell beer and wine in the beer garden. And there is a typo there, or a mistake. I actually found out after this was the PowerPoint was put together. They have a $2 million liability insurance policy, general policy, to cover the festival.
Commissioner Glanzer?
I was going to say, if you've been to the festivals, people tend to dwindle at 2 o'clock and 3, and by the time you know it, everybody's gone before the festival's over. This might help people stick around a little longer. I think you're going to keep it open till 7. Was that what I heard? If it passes. So I think that's a good thing.
Other questions from the dais? Commissioner Farnsworth?
Do they have to have a special permit from the county? to sell
We're-
beer?
They do
marijuana?
not, they do go through the state for a permit through the state, and as part of that, the city has to notify the state that it's permissible in the zoning district or the area that they're going to have the event at, which
Do
they
already
did.
have that permit?
Yes.
City manager.
One and 17 kind of look alike. Yeah, thank you. It's November 17th, yes. That's-
Any other questions from the dais? Commissioner Herson?
I was happy to see that they've got the insurance policy, and just from my experience, does the permit that they get from the state require them to have any special personnel to distribute the alcohol, or can it be anybody over the age of 21?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any. The forms that we fill out and the forms that we look through didn't require it. And so I think the answer is no.
I think Ms. Peggy has some more information on that.
Just add on to this,
Can you introduce yourself for us, Ms. Peggy?
Peggy Loy,
Thank you.
Newbury Main Street. We have an agreement with a local World of Beer, and they will have staff members doing the serving. We will have staff who will offer the tickets, and those people will be checking IDs. But we've also been assured that if anyone appears at the station to buy alcohol and there's some question about them, we'll be stamping people. But just in case there's a question, they will also recheck those IDs. And there will also be Alachua County Sheriff's deputies in the vicinity also.
Any other questions from the dais?
Happy to hear that they've taken those preventative steps.
My only question, I had a couple actually, but the last time we did this for Main Street, we gave them the permit, I think it was for the year, and they could do 3 events. And that way, they didn't have to come back for every festival. Was there a reason we went a different route this time and just did a 1-day use?
Forgetfulness? No, honestly, I forgot that they had done that in the previous week.
Okay.
We could,
Because they've got a
easily
spring
do that.
festival
Mhm.
coming up. You know, it seems like we could save everybody some time by, do we need to, can we alter the motion, or is it too late this time around, Scott?
Mr. Mayor, I think if you're real clear in what it is that you're granting, I think you have the ability to do that.
Okay. My other question, I went to the Homosassa Seafood Festival this past weekend, and they had a Budweiser truck, and people were just purchasing and then walking all over the festival with it, which, I'm not sure this board is interested in just allowing the alcohol to go anywhere. But my question about the garden aspect is, you got the garden that's fenced off, and then you got all the food vendors over here, and you got the tables, and I can't get a burger and a beer and but the beer garden is going to be connected to the food. Okay, so I'll be able to get both. We don't need to, you're fine with that section.
Eliminates the problem of families having to be separated.
Can you come back up to the mic and?
Right, by including it all together. In the past, the parents could come into the beer garden and the children had to stay out.
stay out.
This way, people will sit at the tables and have their food, and the adults can have a alcoholic beverage.
Okay, all right, so you're good with that part? Main Street's fine with that section? Miss Louise, you want to come down?
I just wanted to add to that we have offered, we've got 7 food trucks, and it all is enclosed in the roped-off beer garden, that we have offered them to stay for free after the end of the festival. So anybody that's there partaking, whatever they can eat, and the food trucks will stay as they so please until 7 o'clock. So just letting y'all know.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, somebody want to make a motion, and perhaps, we don't have a date yet for the Spring Festival, is that right? But we could make the motion, approve Newbury Main Street Organization application for a special temporary use for sales at the Fall and Spring Festival. Would that be clear enough, Scott?
I make a motion to approve their application for a special temporary use permit for the year from now. But it'd be up to 3 events? Or
Well,
it's
we
just-
did 3 events the last time, and I think the idea was there were 2 known, and that would give them one, perhaps, at something else. So do you want to make it for the year?
I would say, but I'd say up to 3 events.
So 3 events
For a
for the
year.
remainder from this date moving forward?
Okay.
Okay. Do I have a second for that motion? Okay. Any questions on the motion on the floor? Comments on the motion on the floor? Okay. Any questions from the public on the motion on the floor to give Main Street a permit for 3 events for a year starting tomorrow? Okay. Commissioner Farnsworth?
I don't anticipate this, but if there is a problem, if there's any complaints from the neighbors or anything, will we be able to revoke that?
I mean, I think
ordinance,
I don't know that we would, but I think they would revoke it if it turned into an issue. They want people to come to the festival. But we'll have, they've got ASO on site this time to handle those kinds of issues.
Okay.
Any other, Brian?
Just as a point of clarification, I believe in the special temporary use permit language in our code, it allows the commission to amend basically at will if they so choose. And
So we would have an opportunity to talk to them. Okay, that's helpful. Okay. Any other public comment on the motion on the floor? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. We look forward to a wonderful day on Saturday in Newberry. Okay, next up is Resolution 2018-51 about Newberry Corners Phase 3 construction plan. Brian, you're a busy man tonight.
Mr. Mayor, let me just say before we move on that one of the things that this is one of the things I love about working in Newberry. Only in Newberry can you be an applicant for come in for an application or permit for a special temporary use, and without asking, being granted even more than you asked for.
That's
Love
the
it.
kind of service we seek to provide, right there.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Newberry Corners Phase 3. It is the final phase of construction in Newberry Corners, 49 units. The construction plan approval, of course, allows the developer to proceed with the infrastructure prior to final plat approval. And at this time, the developer said they'll seek final plat approval at a later date. Either they will complete the construction of the improvements, have them accepted by the city, approved by the city, and then come back for final plat approval, or at some point in between, they can come in and request, using a surety device acceptable to the city, they can come in and finish out the construction and build on the platted lots as the improvements are being built. And so it's a picture of the preliminary plat for Phase 3. This is how it fits into the master plan for the community. And plans were reviewed by DART as well as outside engineering by EDA. Comments from DART and EDA were sent to the applicant, and the plans were amended to incorporate those comments and recommendations and resubmitted for final review by staff, which has been completed. And they've also received their stormwater permit from the Swanee River Water Management District for the project. And so staff's recommendation is to approve Resolution 2018-51 for the construction plans for Newberry Corners Phase 3.
Mr. Attorney.
Mr. Mayor, this is resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, approving with appropriate conditions and safeguards construction plans for Newberry Corners Phase 3 as authorized under Section 5.17 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations for the construction of infrastructure and site improvements in a planned development PD zoning district on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida, repealing all resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass resolution number 2018-51 as read by title only.
Do I have that motion? Commissioner Farnsworth is the first, Commissioner Coleman is the second. Any questions for staff on the recommendation? Commissioner Hersom, you look like you're formulating one. No? No? Okay. Does the public have any questions on the motion on the floor? It's going to be the easiest night you've ever had, right? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Enjoy an early evening home. All right. Now who's doing the development surety? Brian again. All right. I think we only have two commissioners here tonight anyway who were here for the first time that we discussed this issue. So for Commissioner Hersom, Commissioner Glansby, it'll be the first time on the dais where you've had this presentation. So if at any point in time you got any questions, because we've got kind of half the dais who's coming from one perspective, maybe half the dais who's coming from a different perspective. So let's do some good education along the way here to make sure everybody's comfortable with what this is.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in 2016, staff was asked to evaluate the existing surety devices that were in our code, allowable in our code, as well as some that we had been allowing but weren't necessarily specified in the code. Staff presented a list of those surety agreements types and the associated risk level with those. At the time, we were accepting what's known as a tri-party agreement. Basically, it's a construction loan, and as different segments of the project are completed, and when I say project, I'm referring to the infrastructure that goes into, say, a phase in a neighborhood development. So the streets and the underlying water sewer infrastructure that goes in, stormwater infrastructure and such. And so on a tri-party agreement, as a certain segment is completed, they would provide the invoices for the work that had been done, proving the costs that had been spent, and they would approve the bank issuing a draft to the developer for the cost of those improvements, and then move on to the next phase and so on. We also, you could establish an escrow account similar to the tri-party agreement where you could draw down on the escrow as time went by, as different phases of the project were complete. The other forms of surety were an escrow that did not diminish. Basically, they put in their 110 to 120% for the surety improvements to guarantee the construction money was there, and then they would sit there until at the end when the improvements were accepted by the city, and then the money was freed up to go back to the developer. The evaluation of those is basically the types of surety that diminished in value over time as the project progressed through towards completion, put the city at a greater risk, because should something occur, default of the developer or collapse of the market and the default of the developer, whatever, if the project had to be taken over by the city, then there needed to be enough money left in that pot, basically, to finish those improvements. And it's not just a simple matter of, you've got sections 1, 2, and 3 done, you've got 5, 6, and 7 left. There's mobilization costs and reasons why you actually need extra money in the pot to get the project completed. And so one of the things the city did was raise the required surety from 110% to 120% to get a little extra cushion, which was a little more standard for what's going on in other communities, as well as basically no longer accepted the riskier forms of surety where they were diminishing value over time. You could either purchase what's basically an insurance policy, a performance bond for 120%. There's, of course, the cost to the developer for that. It's, I think, somewhere in the 2.5% to 3.5% range of the project cost. They could establish an escrow that didn't diminish over time, or they could do an irrevocable letter of credit, which also ties up the developer's resources while it's being used as collateral for the project. And so that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years. we were asked recently to evaluate a slightly different form of surety agreement. So basically, it's a construction loan agreement, and the basis for this was the city of Gainesville now allows these, and so we were asked to look at these evaluate them as a possibility for the city of Newberry to adopt. Basically, it's very similar to the tri-party in that it allows the developer to deposit a construction loan agreement with the city of, again, at least 120% of the estimated cost of the improvements. The payments paid would be paid to the city if the project wasn't completed, if it went into default. The city, like the tri-party, has to approve the payments prior to bank disbursements, but one key difference is that the city would not just approve the expenditures, but they would actually approve the work as it was being done. And so the utility department, for instance, would be inspecting the water and wastewater installations as they're being done. They would inspect the roads as they were being completed, and all of the other associated infrastructure. Whereas right now, with the tri-parties, like I said, all they were doing really was approving the paperwork that the money had been expended. The remaining loan value, as different segments are completed and different draws are granted, can, at least with the city of Gainesville, can't go below 30%. So even when the project is complete, there's still a 30% pool sitting there in case it's necessary. Option 2 is similar to option 1 with the twist that the developer is allowed to only put up 100% of the estimated costs for the infrastructure, and then makes basically an unconditional guarantee to the city that they would pay the remaining 20% if it became necessary. It agrees to pay all the city's expenses, indemnifies the city and its officers from any claims of third parties, binds the guarantors and successors, so if they sell
Brian,
the project...
can I pause on
Yes, sir.
and I should have done this before. Can you go backwards?
Sure.
Because if we've got multiple options, these are kind of complicated, so let me make sure we ask any questions we have while we're fresh looking at this. And this one, this option, Gainesville is doing it. How long has Gainesville been doing it?
When I spoke to staff over there, they said they've had it on the books for probably 5 to 7 years, I think.
And
but
what's their...
They haven't had any problems with it. They haven't, but they said it's only been used a small number of times, but they
Okay.
have not experienced any problems with it.
Okay, Commissioner Glanzer?
So this is only for residential development?
Not necessarily.
Because, I mean, the fire station, did we not have one with them? Wouldn't that have helped that if we had a surety agreement with that contractor who did not complete the fire station? Isn't something like this would have guaranteed that we would have been paid?
The difference is we were contracting directly with a provider, a contractor, whereas in this instance you have a developer who is either developing themselves or through their subcontractors providing infrastructure that ultimately gets dedicated to the city.
Any other questions on option 1? Okay, go ahead, and you don't have to redo it.
Right. So basically, it's 100%. The option 2 would be 100% plus basically a written promise guarantee that the other 20% would be available if necessary.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Harrison?
Question just on point B, that, if a contractor couldn't follow through on finishing the work, question is how much access would we have to pay for reasonable expenses or things like that? If they're dropping the ball on doing construction, what's the likelihood they drop the ball on paying for our expenses to finish it?
Mr. Mayor, that's certainly that's a good question. That's one that the commissioner would need to evaluate in terms of whether this would be something they'd be interested. I mean, this isn't A and B. It could be A or B in terms of or option 1 instead of option 1 and 2 or combination. It is a good question. I mean, if there is some form of default, then I would, my opinion and only opinion would be that it would be difficult to obtain the other 20%. And as far as what would be left, would be whatever was left in that construction loan. So depending on how much had been expended up to that point.
Follow-up question, Chris Herzl? No? Okay, do we have an option? Scott, were you?
The worry is not the good developer or the good contractor, that's not who we're worried about. It's the ones that have the problems. That's where you're going to run into trouble.
Absolutely.
And we have to treat everybody the same. So if you set the rules out that govern all developers, they're the good ones are entitled to take advantage of it, but the bad ones are as well. When I say bad, the ones that are having trouble. Right? Nobody's out to cause a problem. Typically,
nobody intends to default.
Right. That's exactly right.
And for the new commission, when we looked at this 2 years ago, the commission at that time made the decision that they wanted a very low risk for the city. And if someone wanted to develop, they wanted the developer to take the bulk of the risk. The question now is that still the flavor of this commission? We have some surrounding municipalities that have been willing to take a higher level of risk, haven't necessarily had a problem with it. I'd also, different issue, but staff recommended when we did the utility deposit policy, that was a high level of risk, and staff made sure we understood that we were taking a much higher level of risk when we instituted that policy, and that policy has worked out pretty well for us. So it's not that, I want to make sure everybody is understanding when staff says, hey, you're taking a high level of risk, that doesn't mean that staff is saying don't do it. They're just wanting you to understand that you're accepting a higher level of risk here for the residents of Newberry. Commissioner Glanzer?
How many developers have defaulted?
In this area, I'm only aware of one, and we've heard the
And
stories of.
did we
Not
get-
in Newberry.
I'm saying in Newberry, have we been damaged by a developer defaulting?
I'm not aware of a default in Newberry.
Yeah.
No.
Mike?
So the higher level of protection, maybe it could come down, it's not, I'm just asking what the risk for us is.
To the mayor's point, absolutely, staff is neutral on this. It's our job to just explain to you the varying risk levels. So even when we say that, we believe that the construction loan is substantially the same level of risk as the tri-party agreement, it is going to be a little bit less because there's a higher level of inspection along the way, and so it's not just, you will at least know that what's been constructed doesn't have to be reconstructed. So there is some reduction in risk there, but it's at the point where it defaults and going forward. And to the attorney's fault, absolutely. We don't have any question that the developers that we know and love are not going to default. But again, too, if you offer it to one, you do have to understand that we would be opening it up and offering it to all.
Hang on, Mr. Mayor, did you have an answer to Joy's?
Just in my experience in the region, I know of a developer that defaulted on construction in High Springs, a single instance that I'm aware of in Alachua, and 2 instances that I'm aware of in Gainesville, but both of those are pretty old. They had been old when I started working at GRU some 25 years ago. They'd probably been within the 10 years prior, so it doesn't happen very frequently. I think around the state, I know that where Jamie was working in Bay County, they'd had some more, but it's not particularly frequent. But just again, as Brian said, this is all about making sure the commission's aware of risk, because the last thing we want to do is, if something goes wrong, the commission say, well, we didn't understand. When staff explained this, we took it as a staff recommendation, and we think that for something important like this that puts our taxpayers at some risk, that the commission needs to be fully aware that there is risk, not that it's a grave risk, but there is risk out there, and that the commission makes an educated decision.
Mr. Coleman?
The option one, it's going to get in. The only problem is.
Can you go back to option 1?
Yeah, is the bank disbursements, where then the city's got to get involved for, I'm assuming, draws. Is that right, B?
Yes.
So you'll have to sign off for every wall that the contractor's wanting. That's the only thing I see that pretty tough there, because then it's dragging out their money.
A couple
I guess
of,
we'll stay on top of that, right? We'll be quick about.
well, and that
And
actually
then you got
does,
contractors that are upset.
it's
Hey,
a nice segue into a point I was gonna bring up,
ahead.
which is that while there's really only one Jamie Jones in the world, and he's ours, a city the size of Gainesville has several Jamie Jones wannabes, at least, that work for them, and so the staff level that they have available to do the extra inspections that are required and to make sure that there is no lag in, okay, I'm done, now I need to go get my draw so I can move on to the next one, so there's no lag in there. So there's a staff consideration in terms of the need for additional inspections along the way. Also the similar consideration that a municipality the size of Gainesville has substantially more resources to fall back on in the case of default in terms of absorbing a potentially several $100,000 loss if it was a large development. So those are again, staff is neutral, is just items for consideration in the evaluation of the level of risk that the commission is willing to take.
Commissioner Harrison?
So if a developer would default, what compels the city to have to finish that development? Could we just, it stops where it's at?
200 residents in your commission chambers that are saying, look, my kids are being subjected to roads that are unsafe. We've got sidewalks that are not built to specs. We need to finish our subdivision, and it's houses that are not completed and infrastructure that is not acceptable, and the city won't accept the infrastructure because it's deficient. And you're left with, what do we do? You know, do we open our checkbook and then start the process on our end because the surety instrument is not there to protect us? Or do we take general fund monies and start using city coffers to fix this problem because you've got 200 residents that are upset with you? You know, or do we sue a developer that's now defunct and that well is dry? It's a dry hole, and you're not going to produce anything out of it. So expending funds in litigation is not a particularly helpful venture for you because you're spending more money in our office, and the possibility of getting recouped funds is very low. So there's the alternatives for you are very, very difficult, to say the least, in this kind of instance. And the best inspectors can get behind the ball. Things happen pretty quickly in a development process. The horizontal improvements are happening, and it's happening below grade, and it's hard for the inspector sometimes to keep up with where the developer is. And like I say, it's subtle, and it happens quickly, and your professional staff's ability to keep up with what's going on can sometimes be compromised. And in a go-go time like we are right now, you may have several developments going on, so keeping up with that can be somewhat compromised. And so therein lies the problem.
And again, if we would have to assume ownership of that development of that subdivision, then the city becomes a landlord then to have to distribute property.
There's no city liability to do this. When we accept the improvements,
But
yes.
if we had to open the general fund to finish the development, then we own the development?
Mr. Manager?
Just a real important criteria to all of this is the platting process. The city's liability comes into play in a platted subdivision for two reasons. One, when the plat is recorded, the city is now the owner of the roads. If the plat is not recorded, the developer retains the ownership of the roads, and our liability is very minimal. The second thing that happens when we record a plat is the developer can then begin pulling building permits to build houses. in which case that brings on some liability to the city, because once the building permit is pulled, we can't not issue the CO because the associated road infrastructure has not been completed. So the subdivision that you just approved is Newberry Corners Phase 3, and they didn't bring a plat forward. They brought a preliminary plat, and they said, we're not going to bring the final plat. We're thinking we're just going to go build all the road infrastructure, not do any type of surety, complete it, have Jamie go out there and inspect it, and convey it all at one time with the final plat, and they'll never post a surety for that. So it's a very unique circumstance that a plat is filed and recorded, but the utility and the right-of-way infrastructure has not been constructed yet. That's when these surety devices come into play. So to Commissioner Glanzer's question about, does this only happen in residential development? Typically, because typically in commercial development, you don't get a lot of right-of-way conveyance. There is no public right-of-way and surety requirement. Typically, commercial development is a site plan, and they build the infrastructure, and if it's incomplete, we don't accept it, and they're the ones that have the liability. So just like I said, it's real important to get into the platting process is what brings the surety stuff into play and the city's liability into play. And if there's no plat, it's a non-issue.
Commissioner Coleman?
Well, I was just going to add a really good example is at the end of Tower Road and Archer Road. Before Scoble had bought it, which it still has not been developed, vagrants were in there. It was, you're sitting there thinking your taxable values at this, and it's went to nothing, and there's nothing you can fall back on, and that place there was a mess, and that I don't want to see that in Newberry. So,
Commissioner Glanzer?
Do both options cover us 100%? Option 1 and the other option? I mean, option 2 seems to be over coverage, and what's the purpose? I know we want to protect ourselves, but
option 1
it doesn't. Option 1, I'm sorry. Option 1 over gets more than 100%.
Well, the current our current requirements are 120%.
Okay.
The reason being, again, if the city had to come in and take over the project, there's mobilization costs and other added expenses that would be over and above if it just sailed through as a project.
Change orders.
So and therein lies the question. Neither of these cover the city by 100% if the unlikely event of a default happened, because they've been reducing the amount of the loan availability as each segment is completed and a draw is done. So, the only way it's totally covered is if it's a non-diminishing type of surety.
So, Brian, think about the way we do it now. Think about option 1, option 2. Give me a risk ranking 0 to 10, 10 being the most risky. Where are we at right now? How at risk is the way we do it now?
Mr. Mayor, if the tri-party agreement that we no longer accept is a 10, I would
the most risky.
It is the most risky.
Okay.
I would think the construction loan agreement is probably somewhere 7 to 8, simply because you do have the inspections of the infrastructure along the way, so that at least you don't have to dig up what money's already been spent on. So there is some reduction in risk. Option 2, that's option 1. Option 2, I think, is probably an 11, just because of that, or 12, because of the ability. You're just taking the written word and written promise, but a word of somebody that, if I default, I'm going to now cough up another 20% in addition to what I've already defaulted. And to me, it's kind of surprising that that's even an offering. But
and what is the benefit? Like, I understand we just passed our referendum. There's a clear benefit there. What's the benefit of this?
Another great segue. That is the final consideration is that we have made it very clear we want to be a developer-friendly community, and so that is a step that the city of Gainesville has chosen to try to be more developer-friendly.
So this would attract more residential development.
It lowers the cost to the developer, and so it makes it more attractive.
To build
potential for a
houses.
potential developer, yes, sir.
Not commercial, just houses.
Well, I mean, anything that has platted right-of-ways where there is a surety device required. So, and in terms of how it benefits the developer, if a developer posts a performance bond for 120%, the cost for that is 2%, Trip? 2%, real money. It cost whatever, if it's $1 million surety device, then it's $2,500 or $25,000 expense to the developer. If he goes with some sort of a loan agreement, which we permit, letter of credit, it doesn't cost him anything, but it ties up his borrowing capacity. If you are going to build $1 million in infrastructure and you are also posting a $1.2 million letter of credit, because we require 120%, typically you're borrowing the $1 million as well. So you have tied up $2.2 million in credit to do $1 million worth of work. So again, that impacts the developer's credit capability and can be negative to them. So what this drawdown type of agreement or construction loan agreement allows them to borrow only 120% of the value of the work. So it's a $1 million project, they borrow $1.2 million. So it doesn't cost them anything, and it doesn't tie up their credit as much as a letter of credit would, which is something that we currently allow. And therein, I mean, risk and cost always go, they're inversely proportional. So the higher the cost to the developer, the lower the risk to the city. And if we offer developers a lower cost, there's a higher risk to the city. And again, we'll state it for an umpteenth time. Staff does not oppose taking on risk. Matter of fact, I think there are times when the commission should. I just think it's important. We think it's important that the commission understands the risk, and if they're willing to take it because we want to be development friendly, staff will wholeheartedly endorse it and administer it.
Commissioner Harrison.
So, since this was discussed 2 years ago and we're rediscussing this now, the commission can revisit this at any time that it deems necessary.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So that was one question. Second question is, so this is one way to demonstrate friendliness, openness to development. Are there other means to do this that were less risky to the city?
Mr. Mayor, there may well be, and it could be a project we could investigate. We haven't really looked into that at this point, but since we were asked to evaluate this particular one, we took a look at it.
Brian, is as a segue to that, is it possible, this may be a Scott question, is it possible to have different surety agreements for different types of residential development? So, and what I'm thinking of is your now famous data that you gave to the commission about the value of a home before that home begins to actually contribute into the service or pay for the services. So if someone wants to come and develop a high-end residential neighborhood that would actually benefit the city, then we are willing to take one of these riskier options. But if someone is developing a low-end development that's really not going, it's going to benefit the developer, but it's not really going to do much in the way of economic growth, those kinds of things, we take the lower risk. Is that legal to do?
I think, Mr. Mayor, we would definitely have to get with the city attorney's office and looking at it. There may be some housing and urban development considerations in terms of discrimination against low-income housing or affordable housing, just to make sure we didn't cross any lines there, but it may well be possible as well.
The problem that you run into is that it's under your question, you know, the high-end development is also probably some high-end improvements. So you're looking at maybe perhaps more money that may be in the infrastructure or in the development. And so the problem is that these things tend to go bad in a hurry, and it's hard to gauge the financial strength of the developer, because they could have tremendous loans and tremendous financial wherewithal, and yet things could go south in a hurry. And what I mean to say is that it's hard to gauge what's happening internally with that developer. And if it goes south real quick.
But what I'm not sure that we're talking about, if someone comes before us and they say, look, I'm gonna build a development and it's gonna be a gated community and these are 400,000 plus homes. So it's not the developer's wealth, it's this is gonna be the plan. And that, those $400,000 homes, those are definitely going to be paying into, they would then now fall into a different category. Somebody comes with the plans and they say, my neighborhood is targeting $150,000 homes, and that's going to be our range. Okay, well, 150,000 falls into a separate category, so we stick with the Assurity program we have for the 150 because there's no I'm trying to think of what is the benefit, what's an incentive to get people to build the homes that actually help the community in that way.
I guess my answer to your question is, okay, what's the horizontal improvement cost in both instances? Perhaps in both instances it may be the same. Your infrastructure costs may be $2 million, $4 million, $6 million. I don't, whatever it is, it may be the same. You may have very few homes in this high-end development, but your infrastructure costs may be very heavy.
But I'm willing to take the risk for the high-end development. For the low-end development, I'm not necessarily. Am I the only one that understand what I'm trying to say?
No, I understand what you're saying.
Okay. All right. I just want to be clear if I'm. Did you have a?
Yeah, I had a question about that. It just screams, you're not treating everybody the same. Discrimination. Right. That's what it seems like to me. What you're saying, and I don't think we can do that. I mean, I don't think that would be.
Well, I mean, I get that is the question. Would it count as discrimination, or does it count as incentivizing a certain type of development? Because I mean, that's right. The line between discrimination and incentivization.
Again, Mr. Mayor, I think that's where the city attorney's
would
office
have to do some research.
We'd have to do some research to find out if you can stratify your requirements based on anticipated home value. But drawing on my previous years as a realtor, the primary thing that drives whether you're building $150,000 homes or you're building $500,000 homes is the local market.
Right.
And so, we already have one of the greatest incentives, I think, to a developer in terms of whether they're going to build their homes in our community, which is affordable land. That's a much larger component when you average it across the
right.
spectrum of the project than the cost of a surety device. And so my gut feeling is that even if you could eliminate the cost of a surety altogether, it's probably not a substantial incentive. And obviously it's part of the bottom line for the developer, and to the extent that they would like to keep that money on their side of the equation, obviously, and if we could help them, that'd be great. Mm-hmm. I don't think in terms of it's going to be an incentive to build more expensive homes versus average priced homes.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Mr. Coleman.
Well, I think you're teetering there a little bit on redlining. I mean, I know it's when you're loaning money, but here, I mean, once again, I know it goes back to the attorney, but there's probably some HUD type issues in there. If you're going, okay, higher end, we're here for you. Lower end, I don't know.
I mean, to me, it seems analogous to what we just did with the referendum. If you open a business that has 15 jobs, you fall into it and you are incentivized to open your business. If you open a business that only has 2 jobs, you don't get any help. So that, I can say that's discrimination. You're picking winners and losers.
I know, that's what
right?
That's what I'm working.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I think he's right.
I'm right or he's right.
Who's
Mr.
right?
Mayor, well, first
Who
of all,
wins?
Brian and the attorney are right that it needs research.
Yeah.
I don't think we should make the call. But my best estimate is that we are allowed to incentivize, which is different than penalize. I don't think we could
Right.
penalize low-cost housing, but I certainly think it's within this board's ability to incentivize a certain type of development if they wish to do so. And as a matter of fact, we considered a few weeks ago waiving development fees for certain types of development, which would be non-residential.
Right.
So those incentive programs, there is that subtle line, but I think as long as you're incentivizing them instead of penalizing, I think you probably have some latitude. But keeping in mind the HUD things that Brian brought up and the sage advice by both Brian and the city attorney that, well, let us just research it.
Well, and it's just, I mean, we want to be developer friendly, and that's a benefit and a reason to consider this in and of itself. But we're also talking about putting risk to the city, and if they're willing to take a little more risk in the development, then it makes sense that we should be willing to take a little more risk in how much risk we're willing to put the other taxpayers for this. So I think that's a good way. We're not talking about penalizing someone. We're saying, hey, if you're willing to go this extra step, we'll incentivize, we'll be partners with you on that. Any other questions or ideas, thoughts? So where we're at now, there's no risk to the taxpayers? Our policy, our surety policy now is very low risk. It's a 1 or 2 in my scale. Or is it a 5 to 6?
Mr. Mayor, there's always some risk.
Sure.
But probably on your scale, 2 to 3 range, somewhere in there. You know.
So
there's always
option one
there's always a
moves us-
possibility that the infrastructure that was developed up to the point of default was also faulty and would have to be completely reconstructed, in which case,
Right.
at 120%, you still may not have enough
Okay.
by a long shot. But, you know, much lower now, 2 to 3 range probably on your scale than if we had tri-party agreements and things like we had before.
Does the commission have any more questions for staff before we open it up to public comment? No? Commissioner Herson?
How many inspections can Jamie Jones do in a day?
Mr. Mayor,
Depends on if anyone runs over hydrants.
Yeah. Well, you know that Jamie frequents telephone booths, and that's how he accomplishes all that he does. That's probably the one thing I would ask the board to consider. While I'd say that we're kind of agnostic as to whether the board does this, we want to be development friendly. We may consider a nominal charge on a per inspection basis to try to recover some of those costs if Jamie's going to get out there and do those types of things. Brian was mentioning Gainesville, they have more inspectors, and it's quite a bit more. In Gainesville, someone from the Public Works Department will go out and look at the roadway, road bed, sidewalks, curb and gutter. Someone from water and wastewater area will go inspect the water and wastewater infrastructure, and someone from the electric area will go inspect the electric. Someone from gas will go look at gas. So they have 4 or 5 people involved in this sign-off.
Don't forget landscape.
And they'll have 4 or 5 or 6 people involved in this sign-off. In Newberry, it's going to be 1, so we're going to be quicker about it. But that 1 also does a whole lot of other stuff over here. And so it might be, again, I wouldn't say we're trying to bolster our revenues, but maybe try to make Jamie's budget a little more revenue neutral by having a nominal charge to cover his inspection time to go out there and evaluate that.
Well, I think Commissioner Coleman made the comment that we could go from development-friendly, development-unfriendly very quickly if we don't get an inspector at the time that the developer wants it. Absolutely. Even though the inspector's adding other development, inspecting, that doesn't satisfy the developer. They want the inspector when they want them, not when they're available, and then we've become unfriendly because we didn't meet their expectations. So that to me, that would be a concern, particularly with option 1, when we have to repeated inspections if there's multiple developments going on in town.
Is that issue, and this is a sincere question, does that issue not already exist? Or now, because the draws are tied to these inspections, now that in the developer's mind, they're going to become very time sensitive. I need that money tomorrow, and we're
yes,
closed.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, under the old tri-parties and all, you were just approving paperwork. Now you're actually going to have somebody out there doing physical inspections at various steps along the way to guarantee the quality of the work, and then approve the draw when the draw is ready.
Because I can definitely see, in an effort to be developer friendly, we get painted as slow. Yeah.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the developer can't continue on with the project and move forward in the next segment at his own cost. It just means that until such a time as the inspections are done and the
Won't
draw
get the
is
money
approved.
back. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, being a ex or retired mortgage banker is nothing worse than a contractor wearing you out, wanting their money. They got subs to pay, and I'm totally not for option one. I can tell you, we're not there yet. There's a way, but that's not the way.
Okay. Any more questions for the staff before you, Commissioner Farnsworth?
My only concern is that we don't have enough inspection to make sure that the construction is up to par. So is there going to be some kind of a surety that that the construction is up to our standards? Or are we just going to try to rush things through? I think that the need for the construction to be adequate and up to par takes over the desires of the construction company.
Mr. Mayor, the standards for the city I don't believe would be compromised, especially it might actually be enhanced by the fact that you are having these routine inspections, and so you actually have a higher level of quality being produced potentially. It just would be a matter of being able to necessarily keep up, depending on the workload.
Are you referring to option 2?
Option one. Option one. Well, option two it has the same requirement actually. Option two is the same inspection requirements as well. So it'd be option 1 or 2.
Any other questions for staff before we open up to the public? Okay, so anybody in the public that has any comments, questions they want to make, come on down.
Trip Norfleet. Appreciate Brian and them bringing this up, and did a good job writing it on your description, I thought, too, by the way. But I think y'all kind of got it a little, and y'all correct me. But right now, you know, on the inspections, Jamie inspects everything at the end. So what happens right now is we put something in, and we have an engineer that inspects it. And like say on this particular project, we got a loan on it, and so the engineer hired by the bank inspects that. And then on this here, Jamie might have to come out once or whatever, you know, a month or something to inspect it. The whole point of the 120% down on the loan would be, say we got 50% into it, you'd still have the 70% to complete it. I mean, that's the whole idea of having the loan there. So I don't see where it explodes the city, you know, own it. You know, you was asking about commercial projects. It'd be the same thing as we did the town square right there. That's a commercial project. That could have been done on it. We did that, actually. We did the first phase, you know, with a tri-party agreement. And then the second phase we did where we finished it completely, got it finally inspected. Same thing was going on even though we filed it. Our engineers, hired by a third party, which was the bank, was inspecting it. And then Jamie and them still have to come out and inspect it all. And they make sure it's all right, you know what I mean? So, I mean, there's really no more inspections than what cities happen to do anyway, because they're taking over the infrastructure. On that deal there. So the first phase we did with the tri-party, the advantage was it allowed us to start building the houses before the roads were done, because we had a lot of people wanting to move in. The second phase was some more of those cottage products. We had quite a few of the cottage lots still available, so we didn't need to build right away, so we just finished it up and was done with it. This phase here we're working on now is the third phase, and it'd be nice we got 6 or 7 sold to be able to start. We're probably going to finish the road in February, March. It'll take us 6 months to build the house, so we can start building now. It'd help. And like you said, your surety agreement, you know, it cost us about, on this project, on the third phase, would cost us about $30,000, which would costs, you know, the homeowners at the end of the day are the one that paying for it, another $1,000, and it ties us up on the deal. And you know, I don't know, you know, you're talking about the sureties and the different things, but the fire station, what was done on the fire station, was that a surety agreement?
And well, to the earlier question, they are completely different, as in this was a performance bond for a contractor that was working directly for the city. And the contractor provided the performance bond. It was fraudulent.
Just wasn't any good.
So it was on bond letterhead. It said for the face amount that was required, and the city failed to call the surety company and say, is this an actual bona fide bond, or is it a fraudulent bond? And to that end, we were guilty.
Well, not pointing at the city, but what my point is risk in all of it to agree. You know what I mean?
But
if the bond was good,
on those bond devices, there's not a drawdown on the bond. That was a $600,000 bond, and the city would keep that at the face value for the duration of the project, similar to the performance bond requirement,
but
or alternative. So you know, it's
but the bond company would only pay the difference it'd take to complete the project, not the whole $600,000.
Absolutely. But it starts with, you give us all of it, and we give you back what's left when we finish the project.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, you got 120% of the loan value, so I mean we'd only take the draws on what it was, so that's the advantage of it. You know, as far as the city having time to inspect it, I mean they're inspecting it anyway. And I think y'all just hired a new project manager anyway, didn't you? Just got you a new project. It's been a good little project for him right here. And, you know, worried about the stuff. But that's the biggest deal, you know. I mean, me personally, I don't see where it's any risk to the city. You know, we're putting the roads in right there. If we go defunct, we're going to go defunct on building the houses too. They're not going to be finished. You know, we still got to get COs. Mike was saying that we couldn't, I mean, we could, I guess maybe he's right, I don't know, but I mean, nobody's going to actually close on the house if the road's not done, so. And the road's going to a dead end. I could almost see it if it was a inner loop in the city, but the road's not finished, you know, it's deal, like I said, you know. And like I said, I don't see where the risk is that great, you know what I mean? And like I said, it would help. And then to your point, Marlo, whether they're buying a $400,000 house or buying a $50,000 house, I don't think it really matters because the infrastructure is still the same. And then, like you said, if you borrowed $120 and it's going to cost you $100 to put it in, and I get to the $50 point and I can't put it in no more, you still got $70 in the pot to finish $50 worth of work.
And I think that's what the attorney was saying to me. My point was, if the developer is asking the commission to take a higher level of risk, then there should be a higher level of reward for that. And so I don't think I was disagreeing with that. The cost for the city, the risk for the city is going to be the same no matter what the value.
So why is the reward higher for the city on a $400,000 house than a $50,000?
The taxes. If what was the number? You know, if a house is paying, I can't remember now. It's 200 and. There was some number of a house's value is $200,000. That house is now paying for the services it's receiving. If it's under that, it's not quite paying. It's being subsidized by the businesses. So on a higher end house, there's a greater reward for the city because now they're net neutral. They're at least paying for, or they're paying into the system. Yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah, maybe so. Paying into the system as far as taxes.
Right. I mean, everybody pays taxes. It's a matter of whether or not you pay.
Well, I was going to just say, because of the permit and all that, it's same price, electric, same price, and the whole deal. But all the houses we're building is over 200,000 anyway, so we're in the positive. I don't know of any houses, new houses in Newberry that ain't over 100,000. Might be just a few, but not many. But so anyway, we just like for y'all to look at it as a, you know, as a city. I know they had the tri-party for quite a while in the city, and you know, to my effect, I don't think city ever got burned on it or whatever. But like I said, maybe instead of, you know, along with giving your tax breaks to businesses and everything else, you know, maybe look at something like this that's not actually gonna cost the city anything. And like you said, maybe it raises the risk a little bit, but I don't see it. I mean, the whole deal's a risk deal anyway, to a certain degree. But thank you. Thank you for looking at it, and appreciate Brian and Mike for bringing it up.
Any other comments, questions from the public?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, my name is Jay Brown. I'm very interested in this topic because obviously we have a subdivision that we're designing here in Newberry and another one that we're looking into and have done some in the past. I've been involved in designing numerous subdivisions over my 30-year career and have done dozens of these surety agreements for various projects, and I thought I'd kind of comment a little bit for what it's worth, just because I am involved with it pretty heavily. So the thing about these type of agreements, first of all, you hear the term tri-party agreement, and the key to the whole thing is the agreement itself. It has to be done very well, and I'm sure Mr. Walker here will help you all with that and get that verbiage and done well. But there really needs to be 4 parties, not 3. And I don't know why everybody calls it a tri-party agreement, but the city has to be a party, the contractor has to be a party, the bank has to be a party, and then the developer has to be a party. So you got to have 4. And then sometimes you might even consider having the engineer be a party if they're going to do inspections or something. So there's a lot of parties involved. So it's really important that when you craft these agreements that it's very clear. And I think I really do kind of echo what Tripp said in terms of I think your risk is very low on these, okay? Because there's several things. First of all, the developer usually on these loans, they have to put their percentage into the project up front. So let's say he's doing $1 million project and he goes to a bank. Well, the bank's going to require him to put down at least 25%. So when they start the project, the developer's going to use his money at the beginning, okay? So he might have a $700,000 loan to do that $1 million project, right? The bank is going to guarantee that 120%, so that 1.2 million, right? So the developer is only borrowing money as he needs it, okay? And he's only borrowing that money when the improvements are completed, they've been certified by the engineer or your inspector, hopefully both. And so the improvements are done by the time he gets that money, and you've got 120% there. In addition to that, what we do in these projects is the contractor holds back a retainage of 10% of their work so that the contractor who's building this is guaranteeing their work. So they keep 10% aside all the way down to the end. So they've got, by the time they're kind of finished the project, they got $100,000 sitting there that the contractor hasn't been paid. And the developer hasn't borrowed yet, because again, the only time he borrows money is when he's got to pay somebody. So you've got quite a few things that are in play there that protect you. And so then the only thing I would say is that the last part of that agreement, where you don't allow the loan value to go below 30%, is probably going to cause the developers the most problem, because when they're down to 30%, they no longer have any money to use to pay the contractor to finish the work, because they've probably put most of their money already into the project. And so how they pay that contractor to finish the project is at the end of the project, when it's whittling down and you're down to 40% and 30%, they're going to the bank and getting those disbursements. So I don't really understand that point. And again, there's no money there unless he borrows it to pay somebody, because the contractor is just taking the money. And if I were you, and I would advise Mr. Walker to maybe make sure this gets into this new agreement if you put it together, is those disbursements don't need to go to the developer. They need to go directly to pay the invoices to the contractor. And I think that would really protect you a lot too, because that avoids following the money. You make sure that it gets paid when the work's done.
I like that part.
But there is a lot of ways that you're protected with this thing. I don't exactly know that I would agree with that 30% part there. I just
Is there a percentage you would agree with? I don't want to interrupt you, but is it you just disagree with C, or you disagree with 30%?
Well, I think you've already got 20% extra in there, okay? you get certifications at the very beginning of the project that the value of the construction contract is equal to the work that's required. So you know that you will be able to hire somebody. See, the thing is, the part about this that's the most significant is that the bank agrees that they're setting aside this pool of money, regardless of what the contractor has drawn, regardless of what he's drawn to pay, that they have to give you to finish the project in the event that they default. Either the contractor defaults or the developer defaults. So I think you need to be able to use that last 30% to pay for the work. So you've got an extra 20% in there. You got 10% retainage with your contractors. So 30% of the money is already there that's extra if you needed to finish something up at the end. So that's, for what it's worth, I'm not quite sure how that would, and I think that could cause problems to the developers. So, but again, it's all in the basis of the way that loan agreement is, that surety agreement is written. And for what it's worth, I would be happy to participate when that agreement's written and, give my comments, my 2 cents or whatever. But I think this was a really good thing, and I think that people will take advantage of it. I think it's good, and I don't think you have as much risk as you think. Like I said, I've done, dozens and dozens of subdivisions, and I've never had anyone default. There has been subdivisions around here that have defaulted, but I'm not aware of, a local government that had to go in and finish the project. So, but anyway.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Brian, you want to come speak to C, or Mike, did you have, is this right from Gainesville? We just copied.
This is directly out of Gainesville. I would say that I may have misunderstood Mr. Brown, but when he talked about retaining funds, the owner does retain funds from a contractor, but the city is not the owner. So I think that in the payment process from the developer to the contractor, there is a 10% retainage, but the city's not privy to that amount. So I don't think that giving up that last 10% that allows the city to do a better job with making sure the money gets there. That provides the city with 20% holdback to finish a project, and the city of Gainesville's has 30%. And I think that while we are pretty neutral to moving forward with something like this, I would not recommend reducing below the 30%. I think if we're going to err, we would be at 30% or 30% plus, because we just don't get to keep that retainage. The developer's keeping that retainage.
Well, the developer doesn't keep it either. The bank keeps it.
Well,
which is fine. It doesn't get dispersed. In other words, nobody gets that 10% until the project's
I think that point we would probably need to research a little bit more. But I appreciate you bringing it up.
That's why the 30% is there. But
right.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
And what we were asking for on the one was the option one, and I agree with Mike on it. The 30% retained, that still gives us 90% of the loan to do the work. So that's no big deal on holding that retainage back.
Okay.
It's for the city to have the 30%. You know what I mean? So just to clarify our point on the point.
Okay. Questions, thoughts? I have to admit I don't want to have to sit across the table from Mayor Poe and tell him that he's more developer friendly than the city of Newberry is. I think the idea about option one, and I think to Commissioner Hersum's point is we can always come back and do an autopsy on this later if we want to try. Obviously we would probably only do that if we end up getting burned on it. So is this something that we want to consider voting on tonight? Do you guys want, I know we have two people who just got this. We want to sleep on it for a little bit and bring it back at the next meeting, or what's the will of the dais here?
Mr. Mayor, can I just throw in a suggestion? If this is going to move forward, the requester would like some expeditious handling of it. So I think that it's appropriate for the commission to sit on it But if the commission is willing to consider it, I would say that we bring it back for first reading, because it's an ordinance, it's got to happen twice. We bring it back for first reading, recognizing that the commission still has some unanswered or some thoughts that they may want to ponder on it, that it's not going to be a slam dunk, that we just throw it up there for first reading and it's through. It's affording that, let's sleep on it for 2 weeks, but let's not wait 2 weeks and then say, yeah, y'all go ahead and draft the ordinance, and then it takes another 2 weeks. So we just maybe bring the ordinance language together, which I think we can do pretty quick, because we're just going to grab Gainesville's and drop it into ours. And if the commission says it's a no-go, that's fine. It's not too much effort on our part. If the commission says we like it, but we need to tweak this, we'll do that between first and second reading, assuming that the city attorney thinks that it's not a substantive change that would require 2 more readings.
Okay, before anybody makes a motion, I just want to remind, we got 4 here. So, and I know we have 1 who's uncomfortable with it. So if anybody else is uncomfortable with it, everything Mike said would be irrelevant because it would die here tonight. So the only way it moves forward is if we're willing to allow it to move forward, and then know that if we've got 2 readings, that we could either pull the plug and say, we're not comfortable with this. We wanted to see the finalized product before we really stopped it completely. But we would have not only tonight, but then those 2 readings. Commissioner Glanzer?
I would appreciate the 2 weeks and come back and do the first reading then with what you bring,
Okay. Commissioner Coleman?
and let everybody be there.
What I don't like about option 1 is the redundancy. The bank already has to go out and do draw inspections. I mean, that's what I don't like. I mean, that's tying up our staff. If I'm wrong, y'all need to straighten me out here.
Commissioner Coleman, would you be willing to vote tonight to have them bring back, and then maybe we can address those questions
That's where
in the
I'm at,
process?
unless
So,
it can be answered right now.
I mean, I don't know that we can answer it right now. So, but the only way we'll ever get that answer is if we vote affirmative for staff to say, okay, go research this and bring us back something. Is that?
That's
am I
where I'm
reading
at
that
right
correct?
now.
Well, I'd like to hear from the other. Is this something that you're willing to consider and allow to play out for a little bit longer here before we make up our minds one way or the other? Okay, now I'm willing to accept the motion. Commissioner Glanzer, did you want to make that?
Bring it back in 2 weeks with the language from the staff
And
For first reading.
for first reading.
And Mr. Mayor, from our perspective, our next meeting is not a full 2 weeks out. So, and we're actually going to prepare agenda items by next Tuesday. We have to have our agenda prepared. So it would be the soonest we could get it to the commission is the first meeting in December. But we would commit to doing that.
Is that fine?
Right.
Do we have opportunity for a second reading
For-
in December?
Not unless we have a special meeting.
December the 10th or the 3rd?
It's going to be the 10th.
The 10th, December the 10th. Okay, so the motion is to bring it back for first reading on December the 10th. I had a motion. Did I have a second? I have a second from Commissioner Coleman. Okay, any questions or comments on the motion on the floor from the dais? Any question or comments on the motion on the floor from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you, staff. Thank you. That was a lot of education there. All right, legislative day agenda items. And you guys got this list 2 weeks ago? 2 meetings ago?
Yes.
Thoughts? Mike, are you going to?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have just a brief PowerPoint presentation. It's actually a presentation that has the previously listed 18 items plus 2 that we added since, and we're asking the commission to say include these on the city's legislative agenda or not. What that means is that when we have Alachua County Delegation Day later in it's probably going to be in early 2019 now, we'll pitch these, we'll have handouts, and then when the legislature is in session, we'll continue to pitch them and promote them. These are the action items that we want our legislative delegation to push through for us this year. So, wow, small font, sorry about that. These are also in the staff report that we prepared. It's the same ones that you saw 2 weeks ago. So I won't read every one. I'll tell you that from staff's perspective, the first 6 are things that relate to our budget, our current budget. And so we kind of push those to the top, thinking that they may get your attention. So, you know, the first one is the infrastructure grant related to the Ag Tech Park, which I'm hoping will be a moot point. I'm hoping we have an affirmative on that before we ever get to the legislative session. Item 2, if we get the grant in item 1, item 2 goes away. It's covered by that. So they're related. Item 3, we budgeted to repair the Little Red Schoolhouse. We're counting on a matching grant from the state, and we're ranked 37th out of the state. And if the legislature appropriates $9.9 million, we're funded. If they appropriate $9.8 million, we're not. It's just that simple. So we're going to advocate for them to appropriate 9.9. Regional wastewater treatment plant concept, which we think we're going to make that happen. Regardless, I think we've discovered funding to make that move forward. I'm not going to go through every one. Next one is the DOT project to continue funding it. They're concluding the PD&E now. They're slated to begin design next fiscal year, and we want them to slate for right-of-way acquisition in the following year and to begin construction a year or 2 after that. So continuing to fund that project. And then I won't read through the rest of them. You've seen them all. The first 18 you've seen several times. And then the last ones that we've added are things that came up recently. The county commission authorized that the county agricultural center come out to Newberry, Canterbury, and that includes the IFAS extension offices and conference center. The county is, their thoughts is that Alachua County's IFAS extension offices should be the premier extension offices in the state of Florida, because Alachua County is the home of IFAS. And so they have the objective of asking the legislature to help fund that building, and they've asked us to partner with them in that. And I think because of our partnership for the whole project, that there is some sort of obligation or responsibility for us to at least consider that. And a joint ask should get better traction at the legislative area, in the legislative arena. The second is come up in mid-October, an opportunity to cite the USDA offices in Newberry. USDA is decentralizing some of their offices out of Washington, D.C. We've submitted an application or letter of interest for one of 136 cities to do so, but we are the only Florida city to do so. So this request is that the state of Florida prop up Newberry and give statewide support. It's not even a funding request. It is just, hey, letters of support, call your congressman, call the folks at USDA that are decision makers, and tout the merits of that project coming to Newberry. It's 600 jobs and 160,000 square feet of building facilities. It would be a huge catalyst for the Ag Tech Park. It'd be a really nice boon for us if we could secure that. So those are the 2 new projects on there. So we have 20 projects, and if you just, staff recommends picking between 5 and 6 or 8, knowing that some of those are probably going to come off the list. That's about the right number, but we'll keep everyone that the commission directs us to do so.
You guys know, when you're lobbying people, it's a short amount of time, a short attention span. So, I think if we want to be successful on any of these, it needs to probably be more in that 5 range than the 8 range.
Okay.
You get 3 minutes with folks. I agree with Mike. I think we have a pretty good shot of the first 2 going away. So if we do 7, hoping that those top 2, which I think are probably on everybody's number 1 list, can you go back to the
Absolutely.
number 1? We need to
Yes.
we need to give direction to staff. These are the things we want you to really harp on. So if we kind of think about 7, really keeping our fingers crossed that those 1 and 2 are going to happen already, I think you could have 5 more, and you're still in that 5 range. And I would put in a bid for number 19 and 20. I think number 20 is an easy ask. I mean, we're not asking for money, and I would ask you guys to start making sure everybody is aware that the city of Newberry is the only applicant in the entire state of Florida for the USDA, and I think that gives us a pretty clear advantage. The other applicants are pulling their resources inside a state. All of Florida's resources can get behind the city of Newberry. So once the recount is over, I anticipate the governor to be 100% in support of the USDA. I anticipate Alachua County to be backing it. I mean, I think everybody should rally around this. This is a no-brainer, and that number 21, we're not asking for anything. I would also plug for 19, because I think I would agree that the building here in Newberry needs to be the premier facility in the state of Florida. It's the Alachua County. It's right next to UF. So if we can get some partners to pony up some cash, I think that one is a pretty easy sell as well for our delegates. I think that they would understand it, they get behind it, and so I think 19 and 20 we will be successful on doing without a whole lot, which allows us to focus on those top 3 there. Can we go to page 2?
Absolutely.
I guess as I look through that list, I circled 1 through 5 and then the addition of 19 and 20. I like the idea of our legislators only need to be able to remember 5 things, and if we knock off 1 and 2, then 3, 4, 5, 19, and 20, I guess would be my priority list, and that way we can assign 1 to each finger for our elected officials.
Right. Each one of us can take 1, talk on that 1. Ditto. Commissioner Glanzer?
Number 7 is a quick one, though. I mean, it's important if we keep the ready, because that'll allow us to get more grants as a rural community. If we don't have that, we're lumped in with Gainesville.
And that one should be amended to state regain. We lost that.
Okay.
The ready status in August of 17. So it would be regaining that status. There are some benefits to it, and we're gonna always request it, whether it's on the official list or not. But it's important to Newberry. I mean, in some way, they're all important to Newberry.
So
It's
that
just
puts me
prioritizing.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 19, 20. If anybody's counting. So,
Kind of like number 9, though. Something that
And-
never happened, but.
Well, and you see that it says similar to 4 above. Number 9 is kind of morphed into 4. Instead of just being Newberry Archer, it's now kind of a bigger regional project. So I should have been a little more clear on that. I think that 9 and 4, I tend to think of as the same project. It's just the transformation. It looks more like 4 today than it did a year ago when we wrote up number 9.
I don't want anybody to get the idea that if we pick 1 through 5 and then 19 and 20, that means we're not working on these other things. It just means that when we get our 5 minutes in the office, we use that 5 minutes very pointedly. But for most of these things, I have sat down with Chuck, I've sat down with Keith and talked about lots of these things in lots of different areas. So we can lobby when they're home. It gives us some push on these things, but picking 1 does not mean we're not going to move forward on any of the others. It just means that we're going to focus in this session on these things specifically and hope for success. So all of these things, all 20 of these are good projects. They're all things we want to get done. But people's attention spans are short, so we want to make sure that we utilize that in a very concise way. So I have 2 for 1 through 5, 19 and 20. Have we? 7 we're going to be working on. 9 is really kind of part of Monty, you good with that? Do we need that in a motion?
We do not. I'll accept that as direction. We'll
Okay.
prepare.
1 through 5, 19 and 20. We want 1 and 2 to happen absolutely. 1 and 2 happen by themselves.
And when it's time to go to the delegation and to legislative days and travel to Tallahassee, there will be a printed, formal-looking brochure that you'll have plenty of, and you can handle. What they do with them is get them the staff and say, make sure that stays on our priority list. So having a good presentation and making sure it's in written format, to me, is very important.
Okay, we're good? All right. Well, we are on to comments, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sent an email today to the commission. As you know, every year around this time of year, we do a food drive. And it has been wildly successful, and it will be wildly successful again. But due to other outstanding circumstances like Hurricane Michael and relief and Thanksgiving coming earlier this year, we're not where we want to be. So we extended the timeline till Monday at noon. I know that the commission wants to make a good showing. I'd hate to see the commission get shut out. So I just wanted to yeah, the floor is over here. No, I just wanted to let the commission be aware that we have extended the deadline till Monday at noon, and that it'd be an opportunity. It's for a great cause. Blessed Hope really, really appreciates when the city of Newberry rolls in with a big old flatbed trailer full of food and non-perishable goods, and we've done that for a number of years now. And we have a terrifically giving community, and we like to have a little bit of competition in it, bragging rights. And so I encourage you to think about that, and we'll see you Monday at lunch. 12:01, we'll accept the food product, but we will not weigh it and count it towards your accumulation. What's that?
Monday at 12.
Monday at noon, Public Works compound.
Yeah.
Number 2, week 4 of cornhole. And exactly like I reported in week number 1, part of your staff is at the top of the leaderboard, and part of your staff is at the very bottom.
We expect a better learning curve here, Mike. I mean, yeah, come on.
I cannot believe
every
it.
week.
My team has won 1 match, and it was the one match where I had to work late and I didn't show up, and someone stood in for us. And I'm terribly embarrassed about that. I'm hoping to have at least 1 victory under our belt before the season ends. As a matter of fact, we may not allow the season to end until we win at least 1 match. Just to make everyone aware, on a little more serious note, next week offices will be closed on Thursday for Thanksgiving and Friday the day after. The city offices will be open 10-hour days, and our staff are going to transition and work 8-hour days. They're just going to some come in early and some come in later, so that we have full coverage during the day. So the community should see City Hall open business as usual. Our solid waste schedule, and we'll get this up in social media and on our website, will be per normal Monday through Wednesday. Thursday, Waste Pro won't be working, so Thursday normal service will push back to Friday, and Friday normal service will push back to Saturday. And finally, just a reminder that on Wednesday, December the 5th, and tonight I've reported it correctly, we have a joint meeting with the Alachua County School Board. We're preparing the agenda now, and looking forward to, I guess that's more of an introductory, where we're just going to kind of get to know each other and talk about what's important to each board. So looking forward to that. So yeah, that's Wednesday the 5th at 6 p.m., and I think you all have meeting invites for that. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. City Attorney.
Mr. Mayor, we will have a ethics training on December 17th at 4 p.m. at our office. If any of you all are interested in going or would like to, there's several ways you can obtain your 4 hours of ethics training. There's tapes and CDs that you can do and do it that way. There's some online courses, I believe, that you can take. The county typically does an ethics training. This year, I don't believe they're doing that, so that's not an option for you. our office is going to conduct that. We're inviting all the cities that we represent, including you all. So if you'd like to come, we should have some refreshments for you. So start at 4, end at 8, and there might be something libation-wise at the end of the run, if you make it 4 hours. So,
I think that's an interesting way, an interesting opportunity for us to meet some of our fellow elected officials and then get a wider pool of questions. You know, I think that we're all in the room together. We've all faced similar issues and different issues. And so, you know, we've all faced the same one. So, you know, we're kind of focused on certain parts. If we have more folks in the room, we might get more out of it, so to say. So I appreciate the attorney putting it on that way. I think it's an interesting offer, and I certainly think you'll probably need a libation after 4 hours. So.
Attorney talk.
Yeah.
Agree. That's all I had.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk?
I don't have anything, thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Coleman?
I know that Amy, when it comes time to have the, you know, whoever we do once a month of workers here, but I really don't think folks at home and here in the audience, Amy works so hard. Not only does she work for Mike, but Relay for Life, you name it, her hands are in it. If it's happening, and I guarantee you, even this food drive, Amy's a part of it. And I really, it's took, you know, this 4.5 years I've been up here to realize that I don't think Mike New could do anything without her.
I realized that day one, I think. Yeah.
So,
but I also realized that about myself. So.
Well, this is my employee spotlight for Miss Amy because, I mean, if I need something, hey, no, don't come up. I'll come to you and drop it off. I mean, you can't. I mean, that's something that you don't tell somebody. You don't train them that way. They are just built that way. So, I think we need to give her a big round of applause for everything she's been doing. That's it.
Well done, sir. Commissioner Herson?
Miss Amy's ears are red right now.
You can only tell that because she's sporting that fancy new hairdo.
Yeah.
It looks very good.
Yeah. Tonight we had a meeting for the quasi-judicial procedure review. We've gone through multiple drafts, and I believe we're at a good, robust version right now. That group's been Brian, Debbie Boyd, Scott, and myself, and so I think that will be on the agenda at the next meeting for approval. So we're excited about the improvements we've got put together for that. So look forward to that. I appreciated the invitation and the opportunity to join city staff for the Thanksgiving dinner the other day, and certainly want to make sure that the city manager got my box of food over for it to be weighed. Yeah, exactly.
Sure. I think it got pushed in the mall.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it did.
What's
yeah.
your name on it?
Yeah, I can identify the contents of the box because it was heavy. And so
we got it. We got your box.
All right, because you know I would hate for the commission to be shut out, so I've at least guaranteed something will get weighed. But I appreciated the opportunity to have lunch with everybody on Wednesday.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
I guess I'll let you talk about the golf tournament this weekend, so I'll have nothing.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Glanzer?
I'm going to tout the festival again. I can't wait till Saturday and see what it's going to look like having 107 vendors on that street. I just can't picture it. And then I concur with Commissioner Coleman. After Amy went down that list of what you've accomplished recently, my heart explodes for you. Thank you for what you do. And then Sunday, the mayor will probably tell you more about it, but it's a big deal. It's part of the Truth and Reconciliation initiative we have at 12:30 on Sunday over at Lois Fort Park. We think we're going to be feeding about 600 people. CLF Church has joined up with us and providing food, and we invite everybody to come, no matter what creed, religion, anything you are. Come on over to Lowe'sport Park. We're going to break bread and join together with on that for Thanksgiving. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I have just a couple here. Commissioner Farnsworth alluded to it. This Saturday is the second annual Mayor's Masters, and had a great turnout. I'm sorry it ended up being on the same day as the festival. The concept of the Mayor's Masters was specifically about recognizing that rates of veteran suicide spike over the holidays, and we wanted to figure out a way that we could try to raise some money and infuse some love into that community and the time of the year where they seem to be hurting the most. So registration right there on the day. I want to brag on my city once again. All 18 holes were sponsored pretty quickly. We got about 10 teams. I know that Commissioner Farnsworth is planning on taking home the trophy again. He's got quite a collection at home. I'm not sure he still has the same ringer that he usually has, but we'll see. But tee-off is at 9 a.m. at West End. Show about 8:30. We'll get you warmed up, get you registered. Play 18 holes. It's a scramble. It's a fun event. You know, we'll feed you lunch at the end of it, and you'll know going into the holidays that you did your part. So let me know. We'll take you as a player. We'll take donations. This year the money is going to Tin Can again. It was intended to rotate it through different veterans groups, but Tin Can has been up in the Panhandle doing some work here recently, and we wanted to recognize that effort again this year. And then as, of course, we've got the Fall Festival at the same time. I'm going to be wrapping that tournament up around 1:30, and I'm coming to the festival to have some more food and check out how you're going to fit all those vendors on that street, because my kids are going to have a good time. And then, as Commissioner Glanger said, the Truth and Reconciliation. We're hoping. I've got, I think I'm up to 12 churches that are participating, and they will all offer a sermon that's in the same vein of community, love, unity, forgiveness, those kinds of things. And then they're going to invite their congregations over to Lowe'sport Park. We'll start serving the food around 12:30. Don't worry, no one's going to preach at you at the park. No one's going to no political speeches at the park. Once we get to the park, it's all about fellowship. Truth and Reconciliation is just that. It's truth and reconciliation. So we learned some truth at the first event, and this event is about fellowship, just about coming together and being a community together and breaking bread and eating together. So please come. Don't worry about being uncomfortable. We're just going to sit and eat, and everything's free and everything's provided. Sit next to a stranger, share some stories of Newberry, those kinds of things, and just enjoy the day. Commissioner Hersom had a great idea right after he got elected, and he pointed out that we are, what's it called, 125 years? It's a
Quaski Centennial.
I'm going to let him say that. Quaski Centennial. Did I get it right? Yeah, Quaski. That's our 125th year anniversary is coming up. It's 2 years away, but that's just about time when you need to start planning for it. And so what I want this commission to do is to begin thinking about that. What I would recommend is the creation of a committee. Let that committee spend the first year kind of thinking about what we could do, the types of activities that we could do. That would give us enough time to know what we want to do and still have a budget season that we can talk about it in a budget and decide how much we want to put forth celebrating the 125-year existence of Newberry. We could create another committee that could begin looking at that. We could reach out to an existing advisory board and task them with that. I'm not asking for you to answer me tonight. I'm asking for you to begin to think about it. I appreciate Commissioner Hersom pointing that out, and I think it's 2 years to put on what I think would be we'd want to make it a blowout event is probably about the right time to start thinking about it. And it may be that it's a series of events over the whole a course of time. It may be that it's just a one-day kind of thing. That's what we need to begin to ponder. If you haven't had a chance, I addressed the board at the last meeting about the opioid initiatives that we've begun to undertake here in Newberry. There's a website now. It's called newberryunited.com. You can donate money right onto that website. You can find out what we've been doing. You can find out about the initiatives that we've undergone. I asked the bench at that point for $500 that I'm going to leverage to get $500 out of the county commission and the school board, and that will give us the funding for us to do our own personalized. These are the governments of Newberry that have a hand, and we can create those commercials and manage it on social media, and get everybody involved in that. If you are interested and willing to do that, you can do that right on that website, and it's really easy. You can use PayPal, credit card. It's pretty simple, and that also has had a tremendous response. So newberryunited.com. We've got some great graphics that have gone into that. I want to thank Commissioner Glanzer. She was our first guest blogger on that website. The whole idea of websites is to keep it up to date, keep it fluid, keep new information on there. We've got a great website designer working on that, not related to the city in any way, private contractor. But I would appreciate everybody just going and checking that website out and learning about what we're trying to accomplish here. And I believe that is it for me. All right, public comment. Did you have a question, Ms. Judy, about that? Okay. Public comment.
Jim Stainfield, citizen. A couple of meetings ago, I actually mentioned this, and I'm going to come back to it again. In July, August, and September this past year, we had a private citizen turn in a number of information requests, an excessive amount of information requests. I don't know if there's anything to be done about that. I just recently found out the grand total for that was about $25,000. And I think that we ought to be able to rein that in. Excuse me. That seems quite excessive for one individual to be able to cost the city. So if nothing else, we can't do something about it legally, maybe we can do public shaming. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment?
Louise Smith, Newberry Main Street. I'll make this short and sweet. Now that we've gotten approval for the beer and wine garden, it will start at noon and go until 7. And I've been working with 2 gentlemen for the last 2 nights to see if we can get power and Wi-Fi in the parking lot to possibly have football watching out there. That would go on all day and night. You know, it doesn't have to be the Gators.
No, I think your
they do
permit
come on at
actually
noon.
It's going to be tied to it being the Gators now.
Yes. And so that's something else. Please come. It's free. We're really excited about this year's festival, and parking's free. And so please come and enjoy. Pardon? It's free to get in, but not the beer and wine.
We're going to have some imports and domestics?
Yes.
Okay.
They're going to have Swamp Head,
Nice.
Bud Light, Mick Light, I believe a variety of beer, and then a red and a white house wine that World of Beer has at their location. Okay?
Thank
All
you,
right.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Are you deciding?
Oh,
You're done?
delighted.
You're delighted.
I'm delighted this week is almost over.
Well, then, hearing no other public comment, we are adjourned. Thank you all for